Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Today, we are in the Great White North. That is right, in Canada, here in Toronto today. Went to a wonderful wedding last night. Congratulations to Chase and Lisa Armstrong. Got married last night. It was a wonderful, wonderful wedding. And we had a great time. And so we're in Canada today here on the program. Connor is in for Ian today. Hello, Connor.
Hello, Jared.
So I just want everybody to know Ian is off today. He'll be back tomorrow. Ian's grandfather passed away. So we want to make sure that we're let everybody know that we're keeping Ian in our thoughts and his family as well. All right. So let's get to the football. That's right. Saturday night. Who watched Saturday's game? I watched Saturday's game. I had to log in because apparently NFL Plus doesn't work in Canada. I had to log in to a VPN, had to set my location as the United States of America, and then had to figure out a way to watch the Titans against the Seahawks. And there's a lot of different things that happened in the game on Saturday that we can get to, and we'll touch on a handful of them. But as far as what went down on the field Saturday and us thinking about what it means for the 2024 Tennessee Titans, the game was essentially meaningless. The coach told us ahead of time none of the starters are going to play, and boy, was he not lying about that. So when it comes to, what did you think about this player? Or Malik, what did you think about what Malik did? What did you think about this play? What did you think about that? I'm kind of like, okay, whatever, those guys aren't going to play. But there is one thing that really bothered me about Saturday night's game. And this would be a criticism of Brian Callahan, but it's not that I know I'm right. It's just I disagree. And it reminds me of when Jeffrey Simmons didn't get kicked out of practice when he threw that punch in the first day of pads. And I said, look, if we're talking about parenting, I am saying that my parenting is different than his. Like his parenting is to not kick the guy out of practice, even though he threw a punch. You throw a punch in a game. Yeah. So in this case about the game Saturday, his parenting is different than mine. And I just disagree with it. And that is who didn't play in the game. I don't mind that Jeffrey Simmons didn't play. I don't mind that Harold Landry didn't play. You put Simmons and Landry and you come out and say, hey, Landry and Simmons are not going to play in the preseason. Got it. I mean, they are the honored elders at this point. They've been there. They've done that. I have no worries about Harold Landry being ready to go for the Chicago game week 1. You want to give the starters the day off because they had 2 hard practices versus Seattle. Fine. Ridley, Pollard, Spears, Cushenberry, even Will Levis. Now, I think Will Levis can use all the reps he can get, but even Will Levis, take the day off. Fine. But Brian Callahan didn't just give those guys the day off. He gave everybody who might be a starter on this team, with the exception of Nick Westbrook-Akine, the night off. He gave Dylan Radins the night off. He gave Treylon Burks the night off. He gave Chig Okonkwo the night off. He gave Nicholas Petit-Frere. Connor, I'm going to put you on the spot here, a.k.a.
PT.
PT. He gave PT the night off. And I don't like it. Because the one thing I'm worried about with this football team, Brian Callahan's a good man. I'll tell you that right now. I told him the day after he got hired, I said, look, man, if I don't like something, I'm just going to say it. And that doesn't mean that you're wrong and I'm right, but if I don't like something, and by not playing Radins, and by not playing Chig, and by not playing Burks, the guys who really need to prove it, I feel like that allows entitlement to become a thing on this football team. It allows those guys to think, I'm good, but I don't need to prove anything on the football field. And I'm sorry, but from where we sit, and I mean this for all of us, from where we sit, don't you guys think that Chig needs to prove it? Don't you think that Radence needs to prove it. Don't you you see what I'm saying? Don't you think Chig needs to prove it? Radence needs to prove it. Burks needs to prove it. Or are you okay with it being like, no, 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 no. Traylon Burks, you worked hard in those practices. I know you didn't catch the ball. And I know that when you didn't catch the ball, it was because of a cramp. But you worked hard in those practices. It was hot outside. So, Traylon, go ahead, take the day off. Traylon Burks, the problem with Traylon Burks, the reason you had to go get a $25 million receiver is because of all the real games that Traylon Burks doesn't play in. When it comes to Chig Okonkwo, the head coach has said, hey, it's a battle for tight end one between Chig and Josh Wiley, and he didn't play either guy. He gave everybody the day off. Everybody. Radence. Dylan Radence, and again, I'm rooting for Radence because I think that this kid, he's been through a lot, and he's pushed and pushed and pushed. But Dylan Radence is only a starter on this football team because the guys who were ahead of him, or the guy that was ahead of him, quit. Like, he just didn't show up for work anymore. And so now Dylan Radence is a starter. He plays 14 snaps in the first preseason game. He doesn't play any in the second game. And then the coach is talking about, well, I might pull the plug on this at some point, but so far doing so good. What? Radence needs the reps. TT needs the reps. Chig needs the reps. Burks needs the reps. And not only do they need the reps, they need to prove to me that they can play in the NFL. Like Chig Okonkwo, I don't know if he can start in the NFL. I don't even know if he's better than Josh Wiley. And I do have a hot take that people can say, oh, that's a crazy hot take. I wonder if there's a chance if this David Martin Robinson might end up being better than both of them. But again, prove to me you belong on the football field. And the only way to do that is in practice. Well, Chig didn't light it up in these two practices against Seattle. Put him out there. But instead, I just kind of feel like Brian Callahan looked at his team and said, if you remotely matter at all, I'm not going to play you, period, in this game against Seattle. And I think that would then make guys like Burks, like Chig, like Radence, like PT, it would make them think that they're better than they are. It would make them feel entitled to the, well, coach thinks I'm doing a good job because he put me with the starters. And so I'm going to go ahead and just take the day off. Don't even need my pads on. I'll chew up some sunflower seeds. Well, and again, my problem with this is because I don't like giving things to players before they've earned it. And that's what Brian Callahan did on Saturday night. I almost felt like it was a let's not hurt anybody's feelings kind of vibe, as opposed to a you've got to earn the respect that you get around here kind of vibe. Because to me, and look, I don't have any sort of, it's sacrilegious to blow off the preseason. I don't like it. But I don't have any view that it's like, oh, this, how dare you put Will Levis on the bench and not pretend to care about the preseason. I'm not saying that. But I do think there should be a vibe of you have to earn your spot on this football team. And Burks hasn't earned his spot. And Chig hasn't earned his spot. We don't even know what spot Chig is in. Is he the starter? Is he the backup? And if he is the starter, he's the 32nd tight end in the NFL. Radence, TT, they're only there by default. So by giving them the night off, again, it almost feels like you just don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want to make PT feel like he's not a starter. But PT's not yet proven to be a starter. He might be starting, but he's not a starter. And again, maybe his parenting is different than mine. Maybe he has a plan for this, and those guys know they got to earn it and prove it and everything else. And maybe they won't be entitled. Maybe the vibe where we don't hurt anybody's feelings anymore compared to the last coaching staff, maybe that's what this operation needs. Maybe that's what Burks needs to be successful. I don't know. But Burks hasn't earned anything. Chig hasn't earned anything. TT hasn't earned anything. Radens hasn't earned anything. And by giving them the night off Saturday night, you're basically telling them, hey, you're in the same boat as Tony Pollard. You're the same caliber of guy as Calvin Ridley, L'Jarius Sneed, Jeffrey Simmons. And that's how you become entitled. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program. We'll get to your phones on this. And then, did you guys hear the excuse that Brian Callahan had for why Treylon Burks? So NWI plays in the game on Saturday night. Treylon Burks does not. I'm a little offended, by the way, by the fact that NWI is treated like, he's got to play with the Scarbinis, and Burks isn't. But the excuse, Rich, we'll get to it next. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company. It is a Reaction Monday. It is a Titans Monday on the program, though we will get into the Preds at some point today because Yaroslav Askarov wants to trade. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 the game.
Clarification from last night, you mentioned Treylon and Nick playing different positions. Is that just Treylon's primarily going to be the X and NWI mostly at Z?
Primarily, yeah. I think NWI's got a lot of flex. He really can play all spots. But with D-Hop hurt and the timeline with him pushing up to the first game and Traylon playing in D-Hop spot at the X, that was really the biggest consensus for him to not play in that game, is that we're already down one at that spot. And Nick's just so versatile. He does a little bit of everything pretty dang well. And so, just by nature of it, we just need enough, had to have enough bodies to play. And so that was part of it. But yeah, Nick is primarily a Z, but he can play inside and he can play X, and Trey's is focused most of his efforts on playing X.
That was Brian Callahan yesterday. By the way, what happened to the whole Traylon Burks is going to play everywhere after they signed Tyler Boyd, when everyone's like, I guess they don't like Traylon Burks. And no, we like Traylon Burks. We got to roll for Traylon Burks. He's going to play everywhere, folks. He's going to be, and now it's, we didn't play him in the preseason game because, he plays DeAndre's spot. And so there was no need for us to play him. But we'll put Nick Westbrook-Akine, who has 6 touchdowns over the last 2 years, to Traylon Burks 1. We're going to put him out there. I thought the excuse for why Burks didn't play, I got to tell you, of all the ones, and I'm disappointed that Radens and PT didn't play, because I think they need to prove that they can start in the NFL. And if they don't, it's going to be like the last couple of seasons around here where we got our hands over our eyes and, well, why did they do more on the offensive line? Which I will be yelling and screaming about. And I will feel justified in yelling and screaming about that. I am disappointed they didn't play Chig, because I think Chig sucks. And so I think Chig should be playing with the backups, because I think Chig is a backup. When it comes to Burks, I thought the excuse was so pathetic that he plays a different position, especially when Brian Callahan comes out and says they expect DeAndre Hopkins ready to go by week 1. So what is it? Are you afraid to get your receivers hurt? Or is DeAndre going to be ready to go by week 1? So let's get Burks out there and let's get him some reps and prove it. And I'll tell you what really drives me crazy with all of this is how freaking sensitive the Titans are when it comes to Traylon Burks. It is a crybaby convention when it comes to any sort of negativity towards Burks at all. The Titans sign a $25 million receiver. They go out and they sign another receiver. They already have DeAndre Hopkins, and the coach has to come out right away and say, Traylon Burks ran the most of anybody in practice yesterday, and his speed was the fastest, and so we really care about him, and we have a big plan for him. You clearly don't have that big of a plan for him, or else you wouldn't be signing all these other wide receivers. No, don't get on Traylon Burks. Trevor makes an observation about Burks at one OTA practice, and the wide receivers coach comes out and says, yeah, I saw what they said about that. I think that's crazy talk. Anytime somebody says anything negative about Burks, it's like the Titans bring out the cavalry to defend him. Guy caught 16 passes last year. 16. NWI, if he had played the whole game the other night, probably would have caught 16 passes Saturday. Burks is a disappointment. Burks has to prove that he belongs in the NFL. I don't think teams would trade for Burks right now. If you called him and you were like, hey, what do you think about Burks? Would you be interested? Whatever. I mean, but no, we can't. Burks does not need to play on Saturday because he plays DeAndre's spot. And even though DeAndre is supposed to be back by week 1, doesn't matter. So Burks shows up in good shape to training camp. Great. But when DeAndre went down, everybody, including the coach, was like, okay, now Burks is going to go into that spot. No earning it. No doing anything productive. Nothing. Just your spot. Here you go. So when D-Hop went down, I sat here and said, okay, let's give Burks the first chance to prove that he deserves that spot. And if Burks doesn't prove it and DeAndre's not back for Chicago, then I'm putting NWI out there because, as Brian Callahan said, NWI can play every spot. And not only can he play every spot, but he actually plays and catches the ball. So let's let Burks prove it. Nope. Burks is on the sidelines on Saturday. No need for Burks to play. We've seen enough out of Burks. Yeah, when Will Levis delivered a ball on Wednesday right at the corner pylon, and Burks, who was probably in good position to catch it, slowed up because he had a cramp. Again, he proved to me that I can't count on him. And Brian Callahan thinks that Burks has accomplished enough. He doesn't have to play in the preseason. Like he's a starter. If Burks was so good, the Titans would not have spent $25 million on somebody else. The Titans would not have been praying that Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors were available with the 7th pick. John Robinson and Mike Vrabel might have jobs if Treylon Burks was worthy of not playing on Saturday night. But nope, everybody got fired, and here's the new coaching staff, and everybody there said, do not criticize Treylon Burks. Bring out the cavalry. We got to defend him. He can't play in a preseason game, Jared. He's too good. He's too valuable. 16 catches. Mason Kinsey will probably have more than 16 catches this year for the Titans. Think about it like that. Phone lines on a Titans Monday, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Adam in Portland, kick us off. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Adam.
Man, long time to say this, but I agree with you 100%. I thought we should have seen a lot more bodies out there. I do say that I think we're going to regret cutting this kicker because we're going to have to cut him. Also, are we still evaluating Malik Willis? Like, that's a serious question, because that alternating quarterback is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And I think we've seen everything we're going to see from him. He looks like the same guy from day one. He bails every chance he gets, and he's inaccurate. So, I don't even know what we're looking at with Malik anymore, if that's even a competition.
So I don't think it is. Thank you for your call, Adam. I don't think it is a competition. I think Malik is the third quarterback. I think Malik's going to be on the team as the third quarterback. And I think Malik showed enough on Saturday night to justify that he's the third quarterback. To me, that's as simple as possible on the Malik front, which is Malik's third. They don't need to go out and find another third. Now, if something were to happen to one of the quarterbacks and they felt like, okay, we can go get Josh Dobbs, or we can go get this guy, or we can go get that guy, then we can have that discussion when you come to it. But Malik's money's fully guaranteed because he was a draft pick. So he's going to make that no matter what. I don't think there's anybody on this roster that's worth saving to the point of, well, we have to cut the third quarterback, even though the third quarterback can be inactive on game days. So I think Malik has proven himself as the third string quarterback. The kicker, it's funny because I tweeted this out after he made the 59-yarder and then he made the game winner. The kicker is not going to make the team, I don't think. But as soon as he made it, people were like, Jared, don't you think we should keep Narvison? He just hit a 59-yard kick. And I feel bad because if he had been kicking against Greg Joseph in training camp, or he had been kicking against Michael Badgley in training camp, or he had been kicking against one of these Scarbinis that has not made it around here, then that 59-yard kick might have been I think Rob Baronis hit like a 53-yarder in a preseason game against Tampa Bay in 2005. And that kind of, I think Frank Wycheck at the time on the radio was like, he just lapped Ola Kimbron, who was a somewhat experienced NFL kicker, who was competing for the job with Baronis. And Wycheck was like, he just lapped Ola Kimbron. And so if this had been a kicking competition and they didn't guarantee $3.5 million to Nick Folk, then yeah, Narvison would have a chance to make this team, but they did. And so Nick Folk's going to be the kicker. And I tweeted that out. People got mad. And then I texted Joe and I said, ask Callahan, ask Callahan if Nick Folk's the kicker. Because I knew he would say yes. I knew he would be like, no, guys, Nick is our kicker. And apparently Corey asked him, and Callahan said he's the kicker. So my thoughts on Malik and the kicker. More of your phone. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Plus, he's the only guy on the team who actually played on Saturday night, the only meaningful player, because Molden doesn't count because I don't think he means that much. The only meaningful player that played, and I'll be damned what he was able to do. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Again, if you want to weigh in, we'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025. Hey, this week's Nashville's Best Deal is Bavarian Beer House, Nashville's only authentic German beer hall. And it's a place full of food, fun, food, music, and most importantly, beer. Enjoy traditional German bratwurst, schnitzel, giant pretzels, and more in an Oktoberfest-inspired space. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get a $50 gift card for only $25 to Bavarian Beer House while supplies last.
Looking for their first points of the half. Nice catch. Westbrook Akine inside the 5 and into the end zone. The strike and the run after the catch for Tennessee's first points from 15 yards out.
Look at that. NWI scored again. You know, Brian Callahan, and I'll give him credit. Brian Callahan came out and said the starters aren't going to play, which I'm cool with. Like, great, perfect, solid. I'm good with that. Don't worry about it. But then NWI's out there and just taking shot after shot after shot. And then, of course, it's NWI who puts the ball in the end zone. And I have to say, I wonder how Nick Westbrook-Akine felt. I have no idea, and he would never tell you the truth unless the truth is, hey, I love playing football. Let me get out there and play ball. I have no idea. But I do wonder how Nick Westbrook-Akine felt in the game of duck, duck, goose on Saturday night, where it's like going through the receiver room. All right, there's Ridley and Hopkins. And we know Hopkins is hurt, but Ridley and Hopkins and Boyd and Burks and duck, 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 goose. And it's NWI who has to play with the bums on Saturday night. And let me say this, Seattle did not play all bums. You know, Byron Murphy was out there and Boye Mafe was out there. And like they had some real players that played on Saturday. And so NWI has to go out there and then he scores. And then the coach says, well, you know, he had to play because he plays different position than Treylon Burks. At what point is Nick Westbrook-Akine going to look at the production and look at Burks and say, why do you keep playing him over me? Like, I don't cramp up in practice when the ball is thrown my way and it's on a dime and it's right there for me to catch to run into the end zone. Now, I'm not saying NWI always catches them. It's not like NWI is lighting up training camp or anything like that. But at what point is Nick Westbrook-Akine going to sit around and see Dylan Radins, Chigga Conquo, and Treylon Burks with ball caps on and say, screw that, I'm better than this? And I said this before when DeAndre got hurt. And I said, let's give Burks the first crack at it. But if Burks can't get it done, then let's put NWI in that spot. And D Mace was like, you can't do that. We know what NWI is. Reliable, available. Again, 6 touchdowns over the last 2 years. Burks has 1. And I think it was a total middle finger from the coaching staff that Nick Westbrook-Akine had to play Saturday night. It's like when Gerard Mayo and the Patriots had the joint practices, Gerard Mayo said that the rule was if you're a starter and you fight, you have to play the whole game. And if you're a backup and you fight, you don't get to play at all. And apparently Brian Callahan adopted the same rule. So what's that tell Nick Westbrook-Akine that he had to go out there and play when everybody else who's earned a varsity letter, they was sitting there sweet tush on the bench? Chig. I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable. Guy gets no respect. 615-737-1025 here on the program. One texter says, I kind of assumed that Burks was just hurt. Burks not playing was criminal. The offensive line I'm not as upset about, but forcing NWI out there was ridiculous. Also, I believe that Chance Campbell is better than Jack Gibbons. Campbell has been showing out. I said this all week, especially after the joint practices. I said, let's put Chance Campbell on the first team in practice and let's see what it looks like. Kenneth Murray next to Chance Campbell. Why? Because maybe Chance Campbell is better than Jack Gibbons. I'm not saying he is better. I'm saying maybe he's better. And there's no way to know if Chance Campbell could fit with the number 1 defense unless you let Chance Campbell play with the number 1 defense. It's kind of the way I feel about Jaquan Jackson, which is if Jaquan Jackson goes the entire training camp without taking a first-team rep from Will Levis, and he's active on game day at Chicago because he's the punt returner, then that's an opportunity wasted with having Levis throw the ball to Kyle Phillips, who's not going to make the team because you didn't want Jaquan Jackson to get any reps with the quarterback who's going to throw him the ball if he has to get in the game. Well, if he's active on game day, I mean, you would expect that, hey, you're not too many rolled ankles away from Jaquan Jackson going in the slot and from the Titans saying to throw to him, but then he's got no reps with the first team. So that's how I feel about Chance Campbell too. One texter into the text line, boy, people are worked up on Burks. One texter into the text line is all mad about Nick Folk. Says nobody wanted Nick Folk last year. Now because he wasn't terrible last year, he is a sacred cow. This is the first time in a decade there is a guy that the Titans have that can make it easy from 50 yards, and we have to cut him, the texter says. I can't believe I have heard that for 24 hours straight. The Titans fans are infuriating. We're almost as bad as the Colts for refusing to upgrade or move on from a player that we know. Let me say this about the Folk thing, because people were saying this to me on Twitter on Saturday night. I said, look, he's making $3.75 million, and $3.5 million of it is guaranteed. He basically signed a 1-year fully guaranteed contract. He's the kicker. Period. Well, Jared, it's only $3.5 million. It's not the end of the world to eat $3.5 million. This is the Titans we're talking about. This isn't a team that just spends money like the Eagles or the Browns or the Bills or teams like that. This is the Titans. They are not going to sign a kicker for $3.5 million and then turn around and go to Amy and say, we want to cut him and give him $3.5 million. They're not going to do that. That does not fly around here. And so I know that it's like, well, but this guy might be better. First of all, I haven't been keeping up with Narvison in training camp because I don't care that much. You know, I just figured Folk was going to be the kicker. Narvison's missed some pretty easy kicks, I think. Like, I don't think just because he hit that 59-yarder that all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this guy is Jan Stenerud. I don't think he's been that way so far this year. But that's just me. Austin in 241 says, so you mean to say that if Radens goes out there and tears his ACL earning it, then where are the Titans? Guys, you can't play football scared. You can't do it. Anybody can get hurt on any given play, whether it's a game or practice. In fact, the injuries that we fear the most, well, I mean, the injuries we fear the most are like somebody breaking their neck and dying. But the injuries that are most likely that we fear the most, torn ACL, those are non-contact injuries. I don't know how many snaps Harold Landry played in the 2022 preseason. I'm guessing 0. Like, I'm guessing he didn't play. And so when it comes to the Titans and it comes to Radens and these guys, well, but what if he gets hurt, Jared? Well, he can get hurt in practice too. And then if he does, it's the same as Sadiq Charles leaving. Well, this guy who might have been starting for this team, but he's really not that good, and he probably shouldn't be starting anyways. He, I guess, is now out, and so let's go get some other guy off somebody's practice squad and stick them at guard. Because that's what Radens is. Like, Radens is not a good NFL player, but he's the best of what you have right now. So if Radens had gotten hurt, and I said this before the first preseason game, I'm not going to be mad at Brian Callahan if somebody gets hurt. You cannot play football scared. And you're going to tell me that you don't want to put Radens out there, who, again, 19 snaps at right guard last year, 14 snaps in the first preseason game. You don't think he could use a little extra? You don't think he needs to prove it a little bit more that he can actually play right guard for this team so that it's not a repeat of the last 2 years on the offensive line? Because the coach doesn't think that, apparently. But you're afraid of putting Radens out there in a preseason game. And Brian Callahan says he doesn't put Burks out there because DeAndre's already hurt. He doesn't want 2 guys hurt at the same position. So he's afraid to play Burks because he might get hurt, though there may be some justification for that. But Andy Reid's not afraid to play Patrick Mahomes. Somebody help me understand this. But you guys all get, Jared, they can't risk that. I mean, what would happen if that were to be a problem with Radens? One texter says the Titans are paying John Robinson and Mike Vrabel. The $3 million excuse is soft. Right, but Amy is not the one who would be making the choice to cut Nick Folk. So if they cut Nick Folk and they go to Amy, again, this is just how the league works. You can like it or not. Amy made the decision to fire the coach. Amy made the decision to fire the general manager. So the sunk cost from those things goes to her. Like, she did it. She can't be mad at anybody else. Now, Amy's paying Nick Folk $3.5 million. And the Titans go up to her and say, Miss Amy, we want to cut Nick Folk. But because we want to put this guy that kicked the 59-yarder on Saturday, we want to stick him out there. Well, now this guy better make every kick. Talking about Narvis. And even then, Amy's not going to like flushing that $3.5 million down the toilet. The Robinson and Vrabel money, that's her call. Like that, she's the one who did it. She's the one who did it. One texter says, maybe the coaching staff knows best over a talk show host. Ah! Yeah, you're right. So when Vrabel got up there and he said that Craig Aukerman was doing a great job with special teams, did the head coach know more than the talk show host that pushed back and said, Mike, why are you keeping this guy on staff? He stinks. By the way, have you seen the special teams through 2 weeks in the preseason? 2 weeks. We spent all this time talking about Craig Aukerman. Vrabel, no, Jared, we're third in the league in net punting. 2 preseason games, and it is obvious how much better they are in special teams. First of all, the coach and the GM always know more than a talk show host. They have more training. They have more knowledge of what's actually going on with these guys. You know, who's hurt, who's not hurt, who's this, you know, what you didn't see was this, and you didn't that, and you didn't. But this idea that like, oh no, our coaches are always right. Yeah, you guys tried that on me last year. And then midway through the year, you were like, no, Jared, you're right. They're wrong. Aukerman sucks. Come on now. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I see your phones. We're to them on this. And again, to me, the Malik situation is very simple. Very simple. The Malik situation. We'll get to it next. Stillman and Company. Let's talk Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. Those guys take care of my home. I love them so much. I was actually talking to somebody here in Canada yesterday, and I was talking to them about Hiller. And I was like, look, I've got this HVAC company. They also do electrical work, and they do plumbing. And I said, here's the deal with them. I said, I endorse them on the radio, and I use them at my home. And my number one thing about Hiller is when I call them out to the house, it gets taken care of. It gets done right then and there. And I know that's what you all want. That's what you all need when it comes to your home. So summer is over and it's time to get ready for school to start. So even though the kids are headed back to school, you can leave the homework to Hiller. This month, enjoy back-to-school savings with offers like a $99 drain cleaning, $500 off select high-efficiency HVAC systems, and $500 off new tankless water heaters. Plus, they have $1,000 off whole home generators. Visit happyhiller.com today for details. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today.
How did you feel about Malik and Mason now that you've had the opportunity to watch them?
Yeah, they both did good things. It's good to see. It's good to see them both be competitive. It's good to see Malik have some opportunities to play a little more in this game, which was good to see. He does some things with his legs that only he can do. He ran for some yards and got out of some trouble. That was encouraging. He can really throw it. He put some good throws out there on tape. Mason shows his veteranness when the 2-minute drives, being able to move us in position to score, I think goes a long way for him. That's really good to see. He's calm. He's collected. He makes really good decisions with the ball. And so I thought they both did really good things. And I don't really have a lot negative. I think we'll let this thing play out another week. But I think they both done really good things, both for themselves, just as a quarterback play. They put some good stuff out there. So encouraged by both of them, really. And I think that, this time next week we'll be able to make a decision and determination on who the two will be, and then what happens with the third spot. If we keep 3, or if we put practice squad 3, or if we just go with 2. So we'll let it go one more week before we dive too far down that road.
Brian Callahan yesterday saying, no, I think everything's good right now. I thought Malik was good. I thought that Rudolph was good. Thumbs up. First of all, I think both guys kind of suck in their own right. And I'm talking about if they were to play in the NFL against other NFL players, like starting players in a real game, I don't like either guy. But Jared Rudolph won some games with the Steelers last year. Yeah, I know. And the Steelers had no interest in bringing him back. What does that tell you? He's been there for 6 years, been third string pretty much the entire time, except for when he was backup. And then when he got in there because Ben got hurt, they demoted him and tried out somebody named Duck Hodges instead of him, and then ultimately went back to him because Duck Hodges stunk. And then last year, he was third string for half the year. They play him at the end of the year, and then they have no interest in bringing him back. They'd rather have Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson stinks. But a lot of people are texting into the text line about Malik Willis. I've said this time and time again. I don't know how many times I have to say this, but I'll say it again. Malik's going to make the team. Malik's going to be the third quarterback. And Malik should make the team. And Malik should be the third quarterback. When Brian Callahan gets up there at the podium and says, and then we'll figure out the third if we keep 3. I'm like, if you keep 3, only an idiot would not have 3 quarterbacks on their roster. Only an idiot or somebody who's really got, a really good 51st and 52nd guy. The Tennessee Titans do not. I'm sorry, but the idea of oh God, I just want to keep Otis Reese on the team, but I'm worried he'll get. Don't worry about it. So Malik's going to be on the team. Malik's going to be the third. People are texting the text line with Malik. They're like, do you think that the Titans could trade Malik, Jared? No. And here's why they can't. This is the thing I tell you about hockey all the time. We need to trade Duchesne and Johansson and get good picks in return. Nobody wants the players that you don't want. You all don't want Malik. Jared, you think we'll get a 3rd-round pick from Malik? You think we'll get a 4th-round pick from Malik? Guys, Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard is a Pro Bowl safety, and Kevin Byard is still good, despite what you told yourself after they traded him for a bag of footballs. But again, he went for a bag of footballs. You think Malik's going to go for more? So it's simple. Levis is the one, and he's in no danger of losing his job unless the wheels completely fall off. And if they do, they're starting over at the end of the year. Just like the Steelers with Kenny Pickett. Rudolph's the number 2. He's not good enough to be a number 1. If he is your number 1, then that's a problem. And Malik is the 3. His money's guaranteed. He has no trade value. And again, if both quarterbacks were to get hurt in a real game, who would you rather put in, Malik or Mason Kinsey? And you know the answer. So it's as simple as that. One texter says, the midday show talked about Malik Willis being in an odd spot with improving, just enough to stay on the team. But my question is, would you rather have Jaquan Jones on the 53-man roster or a wide receiver and Willis give up his spot to the practice squad, possibly get picked up by somebody else? Or would you rather have Willis on the permanent 53-man roster? I feel like we would miss Jaquan Jackson. Oh, it said Daquan Jackson. I think he meant Jaquan Jackson. Jaquan Jackson or NWI if anybody ever trades for them more than Willis. So here's what I'll say again about Malik on the 53. The real number is 48. That's the real number. That's how many guys are active on a Sunday. You can have 53 on your roster, but 48 can play. In every game, if Malik is on the team, you have 49. Because if Levis gets hurt, did you hear that, Connor?
I did.
Okay, good. If Levis gets hurt, if Rudolph gets hurt, again, we'll just say knock on wood for him. If those guys get hurt, then Malik can become active and play. And again, Malik in that spot is better. He's not Tom Brady, but it's better than Mason Kinsey, which would be your other option. He's not taking a roster spot away from Jaquan Jackson. He's taking a roster spot away from Trey Avery, from Thomas Rush, from Caleb Farley, from Matthew Jackson, from TK McClendon or Quentin Bohanna or somebody like that. That's who he's taking a spot away from. And I just think with any of these guys, you can just go send them to your practice squad. If you want them for a game, call them up. And all these guys to me are kind of the same, which is, let's say you're deciding who to take for that last spot at what receiver between Mason Kinsey and Kyle Phillips. You can probably cut both of them, and one of them, if not both, probably get through to the practice squad. So then you still have one of them, and they're too much of the same. One texter says, Burks is on his way to termination. Every time I hear the head coach talk about him, he uses words and expressions that we all know are the beginning of the end. Burks is definitely in the middle of the 3-step bloodless termination. Really? I mean, I think the Titans are, when it comes to Burks, I think they're protecting him like he's a sacred child. Like, oh, how dare you? How dare you criticize Burks? He's the man. How dare you, Trevor Maddich? One texter says the Titans have more issues than kicker. They can save $2 million on a trade, but kickers usually don't get traded. You probably could trade the kicker. But again, I mean, then you go to Amy. At least you're not paying the money. But if you take the Narvison kid and you put him out there after you trade Folk and he loses for you. In fact, I'll say this. The last guy that traded away Nick Folk because he wanted to go with the young guy got fired for doing so, and he won 6 Super Bowls. So, like, I mean, do you really want to be the GM or the president of football operations or whoever the hell runs Titans? Do you want to be the guy that goes to the owner and says, we're getting rid of Nick Folk because this kid hit a 59-yarder in a preseason game, and then be the one that has to go to her and say, that was a bad idea when we missed that 46-yarder? I probably wouldn't. One texter says, are you going to pull any of Chad Brinker's interview this week? Super curious with your takes on some of the things he said. He also bragged again about how smart he is, which tells me he's going to use AI as his excuse when something doesn't work out. Yes, we did pull cuts from the Chad Brinker interview, and yes, we will discuss it probably. It's on the grid for 5 o'clock. Who knows what time we'll get to it? And I understand. I am at your mercy. Like, you pick when you listen to the radio. So I understand, like, you want to hear my thoughts on the Brinker stuff. It'll probably be at 5 o'clock. But I understand, again, that some of you won't be driving around then, and I get it. I'm not one of these guys that's like, everybody go sit around the radio right now and listen to Uncle Jared. But if you want to hear my thoughts on the Brinker stuff, 5 o'clock, or catch the podcast, when that gets up there. 615-737-1025 is our phone number on the program, 615-737-1025. Tune into the Chase and Big Joe show tomorrow from 9 to 11 a.m. for your chance to win tickets to see Sammy Hagar at Bridgestone Arena on August 28th. The contest is presented by Green Trees. Coming up next, I was a little surprised. We have some Predators news. And not only do we have some news, but it is juicy. So even though it's Titans Monday, we'll take a Preds breather here, and we'll hit the story with a Scarov. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Company 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. And I have said this, that I am up in the Great White North, up in Canada today. And I was surprised this morning when I awoke to see news here in Canada. In fact, if you're looking at the stream, I've got my Tim Hortons cup in front of me. But I was shocked to hear the news that the Predators were in the news here in Canada. I said, what? The Predators? They said, yeah, apparently the goalie demanded a trade. And when I heard that, I go, got it. So Yaroslav Askarov has demanded a trade from the Predators, and the report is he will not show up to Milwaukee if he gets sent to Milwaukee. Now, Barry Trotz put out a statement today saying we heard the reports, but we expect to see him at training camp in September, and we go from there. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. Number one, this was inevitable when UC Saros signed his contract. I kept saying, Willie, God bless him, and Willie, you know I love you. But Willie kept saying, like, they can sign Saros and he can be the goalie for 4 years and, turn it over to Askarov and it can be like Rene and Saros. Why do we have to make the decision today? And I said, because you have to sign the goalie. If Saros had 2 more years left on his deal, as opposed to 1 more year, and they couldn't work out a contract with him, like they didn't have to do a contract, you can't do a contract with him in the NHL. If that's the case, then this would have been fine. Because we would have had the discussion a year later, and we would have had another opportunity to see if Saros can win a playoff game or not. And as of right now, regardless of whether or not it's his fault, the proof's in the pudding, he can't. But again, when all this was going on, everybody kept saying they don't have to make a decision today. They don't have to make a decision today. And Trotz said on this show, I said, 4 or 5 years from now, do you think you can have both guys or are you going to have to pick? And he said on the program, at some point, we're going to have to pick. Well, they picked when they signed UC Saros. They picked. It was over. And I will say this too, because I don't know about Askarov and where he sits. Because remember, he posted something kind of cryptic on Instagram when Saros signed his deal. And there was talk, Barry had come on the show and said that Saros had earned some trade protection, but that they weren't going to go crazy with the trade protection. And then I heard, just word on the street, that the Predators felt like the trade protection with Saros was going to be something that was very stingent up front early in the deal, but then got very, team friendly at the end. Come to find out, it's basically a 7-year no move on an 8-year deal. I saw that. I felt misled personally. Like I felt like the team misled me when I saw that the Saros was, again, basically a full no move, essentially a full no move for the first 7 years of the deal. So I can only imagine how Askarov felt. And Barry was asked when they signed Saros about the trade protection, and Barry fired up there a word salad, which meant he didn't want to talk about it because he knew it was something that was going to be a problem. So if I feel misled about it, I can only imagine how Askarov feels, where the team says, hey, look, we signed him to a deal, but we still believe in you, and there's still a chance that down the road we could make a trade, and we could do this, and we could do that, and they picked. They picked. And I'm not sure Trotz totally understands that. I haven't talked to Trotz about it, so maybe at some point I need to. But I don't know if Barry knew that if you decide to sign the goalie, you have to trade the other goalie. Because I think Barry sits there and thinks, well, I can just send the other guy to Milwaukee and then call him up. And then, at some point, if Saros isn't, then I can put him on the bench and then I can. No, not if you give Saros full trade protection for the most part at $7.74 million. You've picked. I kept saying this. Chris Mason and Willie, and God bless them, but they kept saying, like, he's not ready for the NHL right now. I go, it doesn't matter. What matters is you have to sign the goalie now. Like this, you have to make the decision now. You either sign the goalie or you trade the goalie. They decided to sign the goalie. Decision's made. It's over. So I understand why Yaroslav Askarov feels the way he feels. That contract for UC Soros is not a, hey, man, give it a year, give it 2 years, and then eventually your time will come. You're telling him to wait 8 years. He got drafted in 2020. Hey, I know we drafted you in 2020. We don't expect you to be a meaningful member of our team for 12 years. And I'm sorry, but when you're the top goalie prospect in the game and you're a top 11 pick, you don't sit there and say, boy, I tell you, I dream of backing up one day. Maybe it happens because you end up stinking, but that's not the dream. So I understand why Askarov feels the way he feels. And I don't care what the Predators say about their plans for the future and picking one guy or the other. Because again, I don't know if Barry knows that when he signed UC Soros, he made the choice. Like, I think there's a part of me that thinks that Barry actually thought, hey, I can kind of balance both wives here. You can't do that. At the same time, I don't think this is the right strategy for Askarov. I get it. He's upset. I sat down with Pekka a couple of months ago, and Pekka told me when he got sent to Milwaukee for the 3rd year, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to him, but he was incredibly disappointed by the team's decision to send him to Milwaukee. Well, Yaroslav Askarov knows he's going back to Milwaukee because Scott Wedgwood's going to be the backup goalie. I mean, they're not paying him $1.5 million to sit there for free. But Askarov doesn't have any leverage. And I think this is bad strategy on Yaroslav Askarov's fault, or on his part, because Willie and Chris, again, I disagreed with the idea that they didn't have to make a decision this summer. They had to make a decision. They made the decision, and the decision was to go with Soros. And again, it's not necessarily a decision I support. Let me just sit there and tell you right now, I probably would have traded Soros. But at the same time, the decision is made. The sentiment that Askarov's not ready is probably accurate. Well, think about being one of the other 31 teams in the league. You're not necessarily worried about goaling process or anything like that. Prospects, you're worried about your team right now. The teams that would have been interested in trading for Soros are teams that want to win right away. And Askarov's not ready. So the Predators have to be the team that tells Askarov, hey, man, you're not ready yet. And he doesn't want to hear it. And he's going to throw a temper tantrum when he does hear it. You think these other teams want to give up assets in order to be the team that tells him he's not ready? I don't think so. So if I'm a team that might be interested in trading for Askarov, there is some excitement over the fact that I can probably get him for 75 cents on the dollar. And Barry Trotz probably won't want to admit this, but that's probably what he's going to have to take is 75 cents on the dollar. So I could get excited about adding a goalie prospect for, again, 75 cents on the dollar. At the same time, he's not ready for the NHL, and he's clearly going to throw a fit if I don't put him there. And so why would I be the guy that has to deal with the fit of trading for him and then all of a sudden saying, all right, we want you to go down to AHL Hershey or AHL Coachella Valley or AHL. Connor, you got another AHL team for me?
Texas.
Good one. Providence. You got to go down to the AHL. And then he's going to throw the same temper tantrum he threw here. You don't want to deal with that. So, again, I understand how Askarov feels, and I believe that Askarov is justified by those feelings. He thinks that they have made their decision with Soros. And they have. So he's not wrong. I get it. He wants to play. Everybody wants to play. On the other hand, I don't think this is the best strategy. As much as I'm sure he doesn't want to hear it, as much as I'm sure he probably wants somebody to tell him, you're ready for the NHL and you should be on another team. And if you were on another team that didn't have UC Soros, didn't have a starting goalie, you'd be in the NHL. You're the man. But I don't think he's there. And I don't think the Predators think he's there. And if the Predators don't think he's there, what makes me think that these other organizations are going to trade away first-round picks or whatever it ends up being in order to get Askarov as the goalie prospect, only to have him try to pitch a fit there too. So as painful as it may be, I do think that the best thing that he could have done was to go to Milwaukee, dominate, and then whenever the Preds are trying to acquire a defenseman or a forward or something at the deadline, you're now the trade chip everybody's talking about. So that would be, as far as Askarov's concerned, bad strategy if you really ultimately want to find a team that wants you. All right, we're going to do a segment of phones on this. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. It is a Titans Monday. But again, big story. The goalie wants out. And I get it. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. Oh, coming up next, there is one thing Barry alluded to earlier. Now, again, Barry's statement was just, we've seen the reports. We plan on him being on the team. The end. But there is something Barry said right after they signed Soros that on the surface, if it was anybody else you would think might be bullcrap. I think this is how Barry Trotz is operating it. Don't know if it's the right call, but we'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
The development is everything, and sometimes not only the player thinks he should be playing in the NHL now. Of course they do. I can ask any 19 or 20-year-old, and I said, they all think they should play in the NHL now. But to be productive and have a long career, you sometimes have to go through that. So if Askarov comes in and he is the second best goalie, then we'll figure it out after that.
That was Barry Trotz on with the Midday Show after they signed UC Saros, after they signed Scott Wedgwood, saying, hey, you know, you can never over-marinate the goaltender, but as far as the backup goalie spot is concerned, if Askarov wins it, he's the guy. And I saw Robbie Stanley tweeted out today because there is a thought that, hey, Askarov could compete for the job, be the backup to Saros, and then he's in the NHL, and so he gets appeased at least a little bit by playing in the NHL and living the NHL lifestyle and all of that. And, you know, you still have UC Saros, who you paid all that money to. And I saw Robbie said, the Predators didn't pay Scott Wedgwood, I think it's 1.5 for the next 2 years. They didn't pay Scott Wedgwood 1.5 for 2 years to not be the backup of this team. And so somebody texts into the text line and says, you need to criticize Barry Trotz the way you criticize Rand Carthon. Number one, I disagree with Trotz when it comes to the idea of investing in Saros. The Vancouver series was enough for me to say, I don't think he's a playoff winning goalie. And because of that, move on. That's just what I believe. Now, again, if you're trying to convince Steven Stamkos to join your team, you're trying to convince Jonathan Marchessault to win your team, you're better off with Saros in goal this year than you would be with Askarov or, you know, Lankinen or whoever would have ended up being in there if that was the move they had made. But the second thing is, when it comes to where I think Trotz messed up, is I think Trotz messed up in signing Scott Wedgwood to the contract he signed him to. It's not a bad contract. And Wedgwood's an okay backup goalie. I mean, he's just basically taking Kevin Lankinen's spot. But you can go get that guy. You don't have to get that guy the first day of free agency. In fact, Kevin Lankinen is still a free agent right now. And I think if they had gotten Lankinen to agree to the contract that Wedgwood agreed to, they would have signed him immediately. And maybe that was an overplaying of Lankinen's hand as far as he's concerned. But the one thing that I will not rule out is with Barry Trotz as the coach, the idea that if Askarov proves he's ready for the NHL, that Barry would say, he's proved it, he's in. Even though logistically, it would be a massive headache. Because then what you have to do is you have to get somebody to take Scott Wedgwood. So let's say that you decide that Askarov's going to be the backup the whole season, that it's going to be Saros 1, Askarov 2, and he earned it in camp. Well, they're not going to buy out a $1.5 million contract over 2 years. But what they could do is they could ship him. And there would be somebody who might need a backup goalie. They'd be looking. And so you trade him and you get a sixth in return. But at the same time, the Predators would be in the position of everybody knowing what they're trying to do. So it might be a little bit harder to trade Scott Wedgwood. That's the mistake I think Barry made, was the Wedgwood contract. That being said, if anybody else was the GM, you know, a more number cruncher kind of guy, executive suit that sits up in the box and never comes down, or anything they want, whatever it would be, they would not do this. But Barry Trotz is a different cat, boys. Barry Trotz is an old school coach. And so if Yaroslav Askarov gets a training camp, proves he's the backup goalie, I could see Barry saying, nope, he proved it, he earned it, he's the guy. And I'm not saying that's right, but that's how he operates. He's different than these other guys. He's a coach. And the coach, except when it comes to the right side of the offensive line for the Titans, the coach is the kind of guy who's usually like, got to be earned on the field. So if Askarov gets there and he outperforms Wedgwood, I could see Barry Trotz say, hey, I'm a man of my word, and I told you if you were the second goalie, you'd be in there. If you were ready and you're in there, go. I could see it when it comes to Trotz. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. Adam says they can waive Wedgwood and bury him in the minors. Great. Again, I think the mistake was the Wedgwood contract. If you knew you were going to sign Saros and you knew Lankinen was going to be upset about it, Askarov was going to be upset about it, which you knew he would be, you shouldn't have signed Wedgwood. Backup goalie is not that big of a deal. One texter says, Dennis in Spring Hill says, Askarov is realizing that even when he is ready, the most he will be on the Predators is a backup. They would never let him be the primary starter by paying Saros $60 million. So I'm going to say something that I think I've gathered over the years. And that is that when it comes to the trade protection, I think the Predators view it differently than you and I view it. And that doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that I think they view it differently. You know, when Pekka Rinne signed his contract, and he was the first one that they gave that full no move to, because Pekka was the first one, unlike Ryan Suter, unlike Shea Weber, that put his hand in the air and said, I want to be here. And they gave Pekka the trade protection. Part of that was because this team had been through some ownership changes, and, you know, David Poyle was up there in age as a general manager. And I think they kind of agreed, my understanding of this, and you'd have to ask Pekka whether or not this is what he thought, but my understanding is they did the deal with Pekka, and it was kind of understood, hey, you have no trade protection, but if we want to move you, you'll work with us to find a spot. That was, from my understanding of it, the gentleman's agreement. Maybe they have a similar one with Saros. Somebody told me today, they said the thing about trade protection in the NFL, in the NHL, is that it's not a you can't trade him. It's a he gets to decide where he goes kind of thing. Again, I view it as a you can't trade him. Because I don't think if Shea Weber had trade protection, he'd have gone to Montreal. And I don't know how many other teams would have taken that contract. So I don't like the way this was handled. I do not like the way this was handled. First off, I don't agree with the idea of investing in Saros because the guy can't win in the playoffs. I also think that once you've decided that once you've decided you're going to do a deal with Saros, then you need to look to trade Askarov. And then if you're going to give Askarov the opportunity to play his way onto the NHL roster, then you need to let him do it, and you don't need to sign a backup goalie for $1.5 million. So it's not great. But again, when it comes to Trotz, I'm just telling you what I know. And I know Trotz, he's the kind of old school coach who's going to be like, if you earn it, you earn it. Whereas we'll look at, like, I know the Titans aren't going to cut the kicker who's scheduled to make $3.5 million. I know it. But Trotz is a different cat now. There's a lot of general managers who would have been afraid to cut Matt Duchene. He called him into the office and fired him. He doesn't care that the cap number goes up and the buyout and Duchene's worth about 20 goals. He doesn't care. He's a different cat when it comes to that kind of stuff. One texter says Askarov might be the second best goalie, but they need him playing every day, not sitting and watching Saros. So you sign Wedgwood to play every third or fourth game, while Askarov starts every game. I'm guessing you're saying in the minors. They did this with Saros at first, where Saros would come up, play, and then go right back down and play. I guess in theory, they could do the same thing with Askarov. You know, hey, it's a Saturday, Sunday. Saros starts on Saturday. Askarov gets called up Sunday, plays Sunday, goes right back down. Then during the season, you know, Wedgwood gets to start on a Thursday night or something, and then all of a sudden, Saros gets a night off, and it's Askarov. I don't know. Barry's talked about doing that in the past. One texter says, the Predators lost a top goalie prospect over a $1.5 million Scott Wedgwood contract. That's rough. They haven't lost him. Yaroslav Askarov has no options. Like, if he doesn't show up, he doesn't get paid. And he can't go play in Russia. I thought that he could just say, screw you, I'm going to the KHL. He can't do that from what I've been told today. So you haven't lost him. He's just unhappy about it. I mean, Brandon Ayuk's been unhappy for 6 months, and he still may be on the 49ers. All right, we'll do another segment of phones because we got a lot of them. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. It is the Titans Monday, and we will be getting back to the Titans soon enough, but we'll do another segment of your phones on this. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063. The Game. Let me tell all the fine folks out there that be a hero and save a life this Wednesday at the 11th Annual Williamson County Battle of the Badges Blood Drive. That's right. Every 2 seconds, someone is in need of blood. And in the last 11 years, this drive alone has collected over 3,000 units of blood, saving up to 9,000 lives. Did you hear that? The drive will be held at John P. Holt Brentwood Library on Wednesday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 1025 The Game will be on hand from noon to 2 p.m. with your chance with giveaways and your chance to win free concert tickets. I do wonder this from your perspective because you spent time in Milwaukee. How important is the extra time in Milwaukee as opposed to, well, he's doing well in Milwaukee now, bring him up here and make him the starting goalie for the Predators?
It's so important. Like at the time when you're a player, like I played 3 years in Milwaukee, and I thought after my first year that I'm ready to play in the NHL, and then I got sent down, played my second year. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm ready. And then I got sent down the third time, and it was so hard, but looking back, it was so good for me. I got to play all those 3 years as a number one goalie and got to play a lot, got to make a lot of mistakes, kind of got it out of my system. And when I finally got up, I was already older than, than these guys at the time, but like Askey or, but I was ready. So like, I don't know, like my career could have been totally different without those years in Milwaukee.
Pecorine on our program a couple of months ago saying, hey, if I had a crystal ball that could tell me that this would have been the best thing that ever happened to me going back to Milwaukee, I would have taken it. But he wasn't happy about it either. That's the spot Yaroslav Askarov is in right now. according to Kevin Weeks, Yaroslav Askarov wants to be in the NHL, and if he's not, he may not report to Milwaukee, which I don't think he really has any leverage on, for whatever that's worth. I do understand the fact that it is a Titans Monday, but we got a lot of phones on this, and let's not kid ourselves. There was nothing that happened in the preseason game on Saturday that really changes anything about the Titans one iota, unless you want to talk more about Malik, which I do not. Skyler says, Pred screwed up. Should have traded Saros and rolled with Askarov. First big mistake I think Barry Trotz has made so far. I hope Askarov goes somewhere else and he balls out. Let me say this. I criticize Trotz on two different fronts here. And I couldn't say this is the first big mistake that he's made, because you can argue a lot. Like, it depends on what lens you view things through. This was a team that couldn't score on the power play in the playoffs. He dumped Matt Duchene, and in order to do so, Duchene went to Dallas, and they ended up, right there on the edge of the Cup final, thanks in large part to some of the contributions from Duchene. You could argue that was a mistake. I don't think it was. Now, this becomes a mistake. Nobody gets in trouble on this program for something they haven't done. This becomes a mistake if Saros can't win in the playoffs. If I'm right, and Caroline's right, and Robbie and Joe are right, and Derek, Willie, and Ian, and Adam Vingan's right, and Derek, Willie, and Ian are wrong, and Saros can't win in the playoffs, which I do not think Saros is Pecorino. This idea of, it's a passing of the torch, and then they pass it again. No. No. Not having that. But, again, if they're right and Saros does win for you in the playoffs, then this isn't a mistake. I just felt like, given his contract, this was the opportunity against Vancouver for Saros to prove that he belonged, and he was an average goalie in the series. Yes, he was fabulous in Game 5 in Vancouver and Game 6 in Nashville. He was fabulous, but I think the goals saved above expected, that Adam Vingan nerdy stat that he loves so much. I mean, I think Saros was like 0.01, like not zero. He was average. And I don't know if I feel like you should sign up for average for the next 8 years at $8 million a crack. And then I'd also criticize Trotz a little bit on kind of the misleading element of the trade protection for Saros. That's as close to a bona fide no move as you get. Not, we'll have a little trade protection, but we're not going to go crazy. No, it's one step short of crazy. It's 8 innings of a 9-inning game. And that I find to be, I was disappointed in. But as far as ranting and raving and saying that Trotz made this huge mistake, we don't know that yet. Because there's also a chance. One of the things that is really critical for pretty much every sport except for football, because football, while there are prospects, there really aren't that many. Like, those guys are in the draft, and then you pull them up, and then they're kind of big boys right away playing in the big leagues. But in baseball and hockey, one of the big keys is knowing your prospects better than everybody else does. So that hey, this guy's ranked 17th as the 17th best prospect, but this guy can't hit a curveball. So you need to trade him before everybody else figures out that he can't hit a curveball. I do wonder if Barry Trotz's opinion on Yaroslav Askarov changed over the course of last year. Because around the trade deadline, he was prepared to roll with Askarov. He came on this show and he said about Kevin Lankinen, any team would love to have him as a backup. I coached and won the Cup in Washington, and we needed Philip Grubauer and Braden Holtby in order to win the Cup. So if you're a contender and you're out there and you want Lankinen, this guy could be an asset. I mean, I almost felt like he took off his hat, for the Kevin Lankinen national anthem, the way he talked about it. And I knew that was kind of a ploy to get somebody to pick up the phone, call him and say, hey, you know, what about Lankinen? What do you think? And maybe make a trade, which means he was okay with Askarov as the backup at that point in the year. And now they're paying Scott Wedgwood, so I don't think he's okay with Askarov being the backup. So maybe they've soured on Askarov. And again, I would not have signed Saros to the deal. But if I knew that Askarov wasn't the guy, then that would have completely changed. Not the he's not the guy yet or he's not ready. But if I knew he's not the guy, then we got problems. Then there's a change. Joel in Woodbury says if you don't re-sign Saros, you probably don't get Stamkos or Marchessault. Maybe. I mean, I would love to know what the other offers for those two were. Clearly, their own teams didn't want them as bad as you did. You know, was Stamkos getting offered 8 anywhere else? I don't know. No, it's easy when everybody says, well, the reason I chose to come to this team is because they're a competitive team and I think they're building something special. And I think and a lot of times, especially in the case of those two, it's the respect of the money. It's not what the money can buy them. They have enough money, but it is the respect that the money represents, which is Barry Trotz is still paying me like I'm a good player. Julian Brisbois in Tampa Bay didn't want anything to do with Steven Stamkos. Could not wait to trade him in for Jake Gensel. And I don't think that when push comes to shove and we compare those two, like right now, maybe Gensel's better than Stamkos. He thinks Gensel's better than Stamkos. But when their careers are put on display, it's not going to be close. And I could see how that would piss off Steven Stamkos. So it's like, no, I'm going to go somewhere where I'm wanted and I'm respected. And that may have nothing to do with the goal. One texter says, I don't understand why the Predators finally get a good young, in all caps, good young prospect, talk about him for 2 years, and then sign the aging goalie who's okay to an 8-year deal. It feels like when Vrabel just kept trying to run it back and catch lightning in a bottle. It's okay if it works, but if it doesn't, then we aren't helping this team's future. Well, first of all, you throw that if it works, it's okay if it works in there as kind of like a disclaimer. They're thinking it will. I don't. I am not a Saros believer. But they think that that's going to work. Hey, if it works out, great. They think it's going to work out. I'm not sure I believe that, but that's their opinion, not mine. They're the ones making the decision. But we got to stop talking about Yaroslav Askarov like he's a sure thing, because he's not. And we got to stop talking. He said aging when it came to Saros. I mean, yeah, he's getting older, but he's not old. I'm old. Steven Stamkos is old. He's not old. He is older, and he will get older as time goes on. But he's not some old Pawpaw Gold. Right? And that's kind of when I hear, oh, we signed the aging goalie instead of the young guy. That's what I'm hearing. Again, I wouldn't have done it. I was against the Saros extension. Vehemently. One texter says, realistically, what happens if Trotz says no to Askarov? Doesn't Barry hold all the cards here? Yes, he does. So your option, from what I understand, when it comes to Askarov saying, I'm not going to Milwaukee, is you basically are giving up hockey. I think I keep thinking back to Radulov, when Radulov just went to the KHL. So I figured that Askarov, being from Russia, being certainly ready for the KHL, I figured that it was a no-brainer. That what he's going to do is he's going to turn around and he's going to go to the KHL and sign a contract. And I was told today, you can't do that. That the Predators own his rights. And he does not, there is nowhere he can go. So to answer your question, it does sound like Barry holds all the cards. This is what it sounds like to me. And again, I don't think this is the best bet that Askarov is making. I think they wanted this out there so that somebody will pick up the phone and call Barry and get him into a more advantageous position where he can eventually start. But all it's going to end up doing is make teams fear that he's too immature and that he's not ready, and that he's not ready, to conceivably be responsible enough to accept the process. And you're just going to piss Barry off. And if there's anything I know about Barry, he'll have no problem folding his arms saying, no, you will play the way I tell you to play. One texter told the midday show he needs to stop complaining about it. He hasn't proved himself to the level where he thinks he has. He's simply not ready yet. So I don't you ever been pissed off about something before in your life? There was something that happened to us as a station. Not going to say what it was, but we got wrong. And Chase was furious about how we got wrong. And I totally understood why he was furious about how we got wrong. And yet, I told him, and he didn't ask for my advice or anything like that. I could just see how mad he was. I was like, is getting mad about this going to help us, though? Like, is it going to fix how we got wronged? Or is there like a more constructive way we can do that? And Chase was like, yeah, it's not going to help us. Like, it's not going to help us to be mad about it. So there's a more constructive way to go about the business. And that's what we ended up doing in that situation. And personally, I was really proud of Chase for that. You know, that's a very hard thing for a manager to do. You know, when you feel like you've gotten wronged as an organization, and to not go crazy and not go ballistic and not. Suffice to say, when I look at Askarov, I'm like, I understand why he feels the way he feels. He didn't get to pick where he got drafted to. I mean, I don't know what David Poyle was thinking when they're transitioning the goalie and they decide, hey, we're transitioning from Saros to Rene, and we're going to give Saros a new contract, and we're going to draft this guy 11. It's like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But now you're asking him to wait behind Saros, and Saros just signed an 8-year contract. So now I got to wait for 12, 13 years before I can start. But again, I'm not sure this is the way to handle it. 615-737-1025. The difference, though, Chase ain't 22 years old. And we do need to take seriously as well. 615-737-1025. Okay, coming up next. I don't think I've ever seen a Titans kicker kick a 59-yarder when it's some guy I've never heard of. I mean, I've seen Rob Baronis hit from 60 before, but I've never seen some guy I've never heard of step up to the plate and drill it the way Braden Narvison did and then make the game winner again. So do we have a kicking controversy? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company. You know what? Let's give something away. I'm in a good mood, Connor. Be caller number 5 right now at 615-737-1025. And you'll win a 4-pack of tickets to see the Sounds take on Jacksonville this Thursday at First Horizon Park. Good luck on that. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
When did you know you were going to get Narveson last night? And pretty cool to see him overcome what he was dealing with to be able to.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to play. I don't know if he said that or not, but yeah, he was sick all morning. Kind of sent him back to go lay down, and he just wasn't feeling very good. And Todd was like, "Yeah, I think we can get him to the game. I think he'll be able to manage it, and we should be fine." And then for him to go out there and bomb a 59-yarder and kick the game winner was pretty cool to see. He's been great. I mean, he's had, you can see his talent as a kicker, which has been cool. And you saw obviously the strength that he's got in his leg. That's a real 59 yards is no joke. I think somebody from Dallas went like 60 something last night, which is crazy. But yeah, I think he's a young, talented kicker. And I think those guys, you see a lot of times, it takes these kickers, 2-3 years to kind of find their way. And then they kick till they're 40, but it was good to see. He's been competitive. He's done some really nice things for us in practice. And so for him to show for himself like that, just happy for him as, personally, to put that on tape for the world to see is really cool.
That was Brian Callahan. I heard everybody on Saturday saying, oh my God, this Narveson kid hits from 59. He hits the game winner, and Twitter was ablaze. Oh my God, Jared, we have a young kicker with a mega leg. Finally, we've got a young kicker. Oh my God, can you believe it? Can you imagine it? Are you sure? Did you know? What do you think? What do you make of it? And I tweeted out, guys, I said, Nick Folk is making $3.5 million guaranteed on a $3.7 million contract. He's the kicker. And the amount of people who said, who cares about the $3.5 million shocked me, because, guys, this is the Titans. This isn't like some kind of, rich team like the Browns or the 49ers or the Ravens. It's the Titans. They don't just waste money like that. That's first thing. The second thing is, it's great that Narveson hit a 59-yarder, and it's great that he hit the game winner. And it was really cool to see after the game was over on TV, everybody coming out onto the field to celebrate the young kicker for making his kick. That's great. But at the end of the day, what we have to remember is this guy was brought in here just to take some pressure off Nick Folk, aging grandpa leg. We know Nick Folk can kick. Now, he can't kick it very far. And I thought that last year, as much as he was reliable at times, I do think we need to remember that he did miss 2 extra points that cost you games. He missed the Texans game and missed an extra point in regulation. Game went to overtime. It's kind of a problem. Against the Colts, he missed an extra point. Maybe it was Ryan Tannehill's fault for holding the ball because Craig Ackerman got the punter's leg decapitated. Maybe, I don't know, amputated, whatever. Maybe, I don't know. But again, he missed 2 extra points, and it cost you games. And I'm not the biggest Nick Folk fan in the world. There's also some devil in this, which is, if it's 43 to win at Chicago and you stick Nick Folk out there, he can make it. So between the money and the track record, I knew that one kick in a preseason game was not going to sway Brian Callahan one way or another. Now, after the game, Brian Callahan was asked about the kicker, and he said, no, it's great, but Nick Folk's our kicker. It's great, but that's just, he's going out there to kick. So here's where I sit as far as Narveson is concerned, because I do think there are some of you out there that are scared to death. Maybe scared's a stretch, but you would be incredibly disappointed after all the kicking fiascos that we've had around here over the last 5 years. I said this on Twitter the other night. I said, if this were the 2019 season and Ryan Suckup, or in this case, Nick Folk, goes down at the end of training camp with an injury, and Narveson's hitting from 59 and he's hitting game winners, he's going to make the team. They're not going to go out and sign Cairo Santos or Cody Parkey or Greg Joseph or Ryan Santoso or any of those guys they had that year. If the next year, when it was Joseph and I think a guy named Blake McCann or Tucker McCann or something like that, when it was those two guys going at it, and they ended up going with the Badgley, and then they signed Fat Boy, Randy Bullock. When they did that, I mean, if Narveson was kicking from 59 in training, he'd have won the job. They would have never gone after Mini Leg. If, again, a couple years later, if instead of whatever it was they were trying to run out there last year in training camp, if they had this guy hitting from 59, then he probably wins the job and they don't even make the trade with the Patriots in order to get Nick Folk. But the reality is Nick Folk's on the team. So the only way that I could see the Titans, if you're afraid and if they're afraid of him going to another team and Narveson going out there and hitting 59 yarders for another team, and you to sit there and say, oh my God, we got this old grandpa on a 1-year deal who's a kicker who clearly doesn't have many more years left in his leg. And he's going to be our kicker because we decided in March to give this guy $3.5 million. And we give up a guy that's hitting from 59. Oh my God. If that's the case, maybe you keep 2 kickers on the roster. And before you say that's crazy, and it probably is a little crazy. I mean, I wouldn't do it. But this is if you're so afraid of it that you feel like you have to do it. Before you do that, I would just say when it comes to these 53-man rosters I'm doing, every Friday at 5:30, and we'll have one before the New Orleans game and we'll have one after the New Orleans game as far as what the Titans 53-man roster should look like. But when I'm putting these 53-man rosters together, it's not hard to find guys that I think I could get through the practice squad. And if I couldn't get them through to the practice squad, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Last week, we had like 6 of them. Mason Kinsey, Quentin Bohanna, Matthew Jackson, Trey Avery. Like, if I can't get one of those guys through to the practice squad, I can go get somebody else to be on the practice squad that is the caliber of that kind of player. I mean, I don't understand why the team has to carry 3 running backs on the roster when you could send Chestnut and Haskins to the practice squad, and whoever doesn't get through, the other one does, call them up on game day. So if you really want Narveson, it's not, I want Narveson to replace Nick Folk. It is, I want Narveson to join Nick Folk. So you put him on the 53-man roster. Maybe you let him handle the kickoffs. You make him inactive, for the however long to begin, whatever. But again, it is not we're going to do this over Nick Folk. It would be, we're going to do this with Nick Folk. 615-737-1025 is our phone number on the program. Brian Callahan said something yesterday that wasn't a giant flag saying, Jared, you were right. But I do think it was a giant flag that said, Jared, you might be right. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company on a Titans Monday, 1025, 106 the game. Company 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios on a Titans Monday, even though no meaningful players played in the game on Saturday, except for Nick Westbrook-Akine. He did play in that, but other than that, Brian Callahan went out of his way to make sure that literally no meaningful players, even guys like Traylon Burks and Chiga Konkwo, and the guys that have proven themselves to not be great players, not even they had to go out there on Saturday against Seattle. And that includes the right side of the offensive line with Dylan Radins at right guard and Nicholas Petit-Frere, Connor, a.k.a.
PT
at right tackle. So after the game was over, Brian Callahan's press conference yesterday, he was asked by the media about the right side of the offensive line, what's going on with Radins, what's going on with PT. Here's what he said.
Still in competition mode, I guess, at right guard and right tackle. Is anybody kind of trending in the right direction there?
Yeah, I think they're trend. I think what you see with our starting group, which was Dylan and Nick, are trending in the direction as being the starters. It's not over yet for sure, but those guys have performed well enough at that point to when we walk out with the starters against New Orleans, those guys will be the guys that are starting this week. So again, I reserve all right to pull the plug on that one if I so choose to, but as of right now, those guys have been the guys that have played the best.
That did not sound like an endorsement. I mean, that sounded like hey, they're the guys that are out there that are playing the best. So if we start them on Sunday against New Orleans, then we start them on Sunday against New Orleans. But I reserve the right to change my mind about that. Woo, that is not good. So I teased this segment by saying Brian Callahan didn't raise a flag that said, Jared, you're right yesterday. But you could argue that he was waving a flag that could have said, Jared, you might be right. And I'll extend it to probably right. Brian Callahan says it without saying. He says, right now, Radins and PT are the best we've got. Period. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And by saying that they're playing the best right now is really an indictment of everybody else. And that is how we got here, right? They went into training camp. We're going to battle it out on the right side of the line. Clearly, they don't like Daniel Brunskill. They clearly do not view him as an option as a starter. He's not big enough, whatever. They don't like him. But they were going to battle it out. They were going to have all kinds of guys battle. They were going to have PT and Jalen Duncan and John Ojukwu battle it out at right tackle. And they were going to have Dylan Radins and Sadiq Charles and whoever else battle it out at right guard. And here we are, because one guy quit, and the other two guys, Duncan and Ojukwu, stink. And by default, Brian Callahan knows there's a chance he's going out there. It is more likely than not he's rolling out there in Chicago with Dylan Radins and PT on the right side of the offensive line. So now we're going to see who was right. Was I right? When I bitched and bitched and bitched all off season long about right tackle? When I sat down with Brian Callahan the day after he was hired, and look, I love Brian Callahan. I think he knows what it is. I think he knows that he's got a problem on his hands on the right side of the line. But I told him the right tackle story. And I told him the right tackle story because I'm sick and tired of the Titans not having a right tackle. I tell you the right tackle story not because I want to beat it into your heads or not because I want to put anybody down, but I tell you the right tackle story because for me, it is the bluntest way that the old man said you can't be good if you don't have a right tackle. Period. There was no room for wiggle room on that. We don't have a right tackle. Pretty important position, huh? Right tackle? There is no, it's binary. You don't have a right tackle, you stink. And right now, after an entire offseason where I said, please go get a right tackle, please sign Jermaine Illuminor, Please trade for Morgan Moses. Please use that second-round pick on drafting a right tackle. Please, please, please get a right tackle. Everybody said it'll be fine. So now we're going to see who's right. Was Jared right? Or was Bill Callahan, Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, whoever, were they right? Because I was scared to death about this from day one. When we put together our needs going into the offseason when it came to the Titans, I'd said every single time, left tackle. I didn't say left guard. You know I'm not a huge Skoronski guy, but I did not say left guard because I knew Peter's going to play left guard. Left tackle, center, right guard, right tackle, tight end, running back, wide receiver, wide receiver. They filled some of those holes. And we went over them on defense. And we said, hey, they need help at inside linebacker. They signed an inside linebacker. We said they need help at safety. It took them forever, but they signed a couple of safeties. We said they needed a corner. They signed 2. Outside of edge rusher, which they got some good news on with the Arden Key thing, but I still think you can do better than Arden Key. Outside of edge rusher, they pretty much checked off the boxes as far as the defense was concerned. On offense, they just said, no, Chig, he'll be fine at tight end. Chig's battling for his job right now. And again, I know this is going to sound like a hot take. I wouldn't be shocked if David Martin Robinson ends up being the best tight end on this team. But you can get by at tight end. You can fudge it there. You can't fudge it at right tackle. So here we are. They said it'll be fine. Oh, no, Jared, they have traits that we like, and so we're going to give them a chance, and maybe we'll see. Okay. You said it'll be fine. You guys told me. Jared, why are you so mad about the team in March? It's only March. We still haven't even gotten to the draft yet. There's going to be another wave of free agency. It'll be fine. You said it'll be fine. You told me not to worry. And right now, it's Radence and PT. By the way, it should be noted, and I mean this with all due respect, Radence and PT, probably 2 of the biggest culprits, not as big as Aaron Brewer or Andre Dillard, but probably 2 of the biggest culprits as to why the offensive line was so atrocious over the last 2 years. Because I believe Radence was drafted in the 2nd round. Granted, he was good enough to do this, and I don't know why they did it, but Radence was drafted to be the starting right tackle on the 2021 Tennessee Titans. And if not the 2021 Tennessee Titans, then definitely the 2022 Tennessee Titans. And PT was drafted, I believe, in 2022 to be the heir apparent to Taylor Lewan at left tackle. I think they drafted PT with the idea of, hey, played at Ohio State. He played left tackle. He played right tackle. He could be a swing for us as a rookie. And then eventually we can put him in there at left tackle. Similarly to what Amani Hooker was. Hey, Amani Hooker can be our 3rd safety. He can play in on a nickel package. Really more dime than nickel, but he can play in there a little bit. And then after a couple of years, time to move on from Kenny Vaccaro and put Hooker in that spot. That's what I think their plan was with PT. So the 2 guys that have contributed massively to the horrific offensive line play that we've seen over the last couple of years, those 2 guys are now our only hope at right guard and right tackle. And even Brian Callahan, knowing that they're the only hope at right guard and right tackle, even then he's like, by the way, I reserve the right to change my mind if I want to. Well, Brian Callahan may have to learn this the hard way because this is the first time that he's done this without Joe Burrow. It's really hard to change your mind in August. You want to know why I get mad in March and April? Because that's when you can fix this kind of stuff. If you had brought Jermaine Illuminor in, signed for $7 million, you guys tell me $3.5 million doesn't matter. If they had signed Jermaine Illuminor to play right tackle for this team and given PT a chance and PT beat him out, well, then Jermaine Illuminor slides into right guard. And at $7 million, that's still a pretty good deal. But no, they weren't interested. They knew better. And I kept saying, okay, you guys say you know better. Let's actually see if you know better. And now they're at a point where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You can see the Chicago game. The Chicago game is not as far away as I think some of you people want to believe that it might be. And here we are on August 19th, and the coach is saying, well, they've played the best of all the other guys that we have, and they should because the other guys aren't good. They've played the best of what we had, so I mean, I guess we'll play them, against Chicago. But hey, I reserve the right to change my opinion and pull the plug if I so choose to, because this is going to be that bad. But maybe they're right. Maybe this was their plan all along. And these two guys are going to play, like Dylan Radins' draft status or like Nicholas Petit-Frère's recruiting ranking coming out of high school. Maybe. But I think even Brian Callahan's feeling it a little bit, which is, oh God, I have a game in 3 weeks. And I don't know what I'm going to do at right guard and right. I mean, I guess it's going to be them. What I say last week after the Seahawks practices, it will be fine. Season is over. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Speaking of the offensive line and the battles on the offensive line and everything else, coming up next, there is one thing that the Titans tried to make a thing. I watched a game Saturday. It's not. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company here on the program. First, let's talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. You have heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and my official sportsbook app. Well, we have something that's a little different for you because right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV's base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you could cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/JGM to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/JGM. 21 and over in Tennessee. Full price of NFL Sunday Ticket will be automatically charged seasonally after free trial, no refunds. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
As a guy like that, you know, you want to, you said the tape is an audition. So other teams may not see.
It's always a tricky battle, but I think more importantly is we want to see them play, and especially for some of those guys that you can't simulate it in practice. You need to see what live reps look like, and I think what happens is the cut down a lot of times is I've been a part of this enough years that you look at your own players and you think, oh man, I somebody will claim them, but then you realize that everybody else has those players on their roster too that they feel about it. So a lot of the times when you think that someone's going to get claimed by another team, you got to remind them that they're got to be claimed to an active roster. So they're making a 53 with a player that hasn't been there for the last 6 months. Not that it's impossible, but it just most of the time it usually ends up the other way where everyone's trying to keep their own players. And so it can be a delicate balance because you need to see the game reps, you need to see them play. But I think everyone else has those same people that they're watching in the same roles. And so you always want to make sure you got the evaluation right first before you decide to hide a player.
That was Brian Callahan talking about, hey, you know, sometimes maybe we don't want other teams to see a guy because we might want to try to cut that guy, and then we might want to try to slip him through the practice squad, and we think that guy could be important to us, so we don't want to do this, and we don't want to, and great. But let me say this. There are way too many guys on this team that aren't that good. And the first guy I'm going to point out is Andrew Rupchich. So the Titans said there was going to be a battle at right guard coming into training camp. And it was going to be Sadiq Charles and Radence. And we thought Brunskill was going to be a part of the mix. Makes sense. He started at right guard last year, wasn't a disaster, and has starting experience and certainly has to be better than some of these crap bums that are out there. And I certainly think he is better than some of those guys. But for whatever reason, they're down on Brunskill. They don't like him. So forget it. He's not an option at guard. So it was Sadiq Charles versus Dylan Radens. And trust me, the same way they're giving the job to Dylan Radens, they were going to give that job to Sadiq Charles. All Sadiq Charles had to do was show up to work. And he decided not to do that. So then, because the Titans didn't just want to give Radens the job, they wanted him to at least think he has to earn it. Now, they don't make him play in any of the preseason games, so I don't understand how he could earn it. But instead of just handing him the job and saying, Dylan, you're the right guard, instead of that, they decided to invent this bullcrap that Andrew Rupchich might be an option to start at right guard. Did you watch the game Saturday? He was never and will never be an option unless people get hurt. And it's who do we have to put in there? No, it's like that game they played against the Texans in Vrabel's first season when Taylor Lewan was concussed and Dennis Kelly, I think, was sick and Jack Conklin was still hurt. And so they had no tackles and they put Pamfield and they called up Tyler Merritz from the practice squad, and they were going up against J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless. And it was like, all right, guys, good luck. That's what Andrew Rupchich is. Andrew Rupchich starting at guard is like Malik starting at quarterback. It only happens if there's just no other way for it to not happen. Not the kind of guy who can come in and challenge for a job. So after watching Rupchich on Saturday, Rupchich isn't just terrible, but Rupchich is not an NFL starting caliber player. He's probably not an NFL backup caliber. And so he's the kind of guy who's really, he's a practice squad guy. Like he should be on the practice squad this year and get called up. He won't be because, again, Sadiq Charles, their big signing at guard this offseason decided to just stop going to work, but he's a practice squad player. So the idea of him starting at right guard, no, sir. Like at least with Radens, I can give Radens credit that he played well at right tackle at the end of last year for his standard. So if you put him at right guard, maybe it'll work. Let's see. But Rupchich, that's not an option. And that's what takes me back to that cut we played where Brian Callahan was talking about trying to hide guys so that other teams don't claim them. I mean, I don't worry about the guys who are going to make this team. I think there's probably about 47, 46 guys that belong in the NFL. And then after that, we get into Rupchich and Hassan Haskins and Trey Avery and Matthew Jackson. And to me, you can get rid of all those guys and start claiming all these other players that get cut by other teams that are definitely going to be better on the offensive line than Rupchich. So I know they tried to make it a thing, and they tried to make it a thing, not because they thought Rupchich could play, but I think they tried to make it a thing because they didn't want Dylan Radins to think that he could just walk to the right guard position, the same way PT has walked to the right tackle position, but it is the truth. And then I watched the game Saturday, again, with this idea that, hey, the Titans, they might give Rupchich a shot to try to win that job. And it's like, like, no. Move on. Let's see who else is on these other teams. Maybe they can go get somebody there. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Joe from Maryland says, you are already starting to sound as frustrated with Brian Callahan as you were with Mike Vrabel. It's a different kind of frustration. With Vrabel, I thought he was incapable of being accountable, which was, I mean, to me, an incredible hallmark. You know, the fact that this guy who preached accountability, who said nobody's entitled to anything, was so entitled that he could never be held accountable. That's not going to be Brian Callahan. I think Brian Callahan is a good man. I think Brian Callahan's a smart guy. I think he's a good guy. I really do. You know, I think I brought this up earlier today when we were talking about Barry Trotz. I can't remember. When these guys get jobs now, coaches and GMs, I tell them, I'm like, guys, here's my phone number. If you've got a problem, call me. Now, you may not like what you hear, but if you want to air it out, go ahead and air it out. But I tell them, I'm like, I'm the guy in town who, like, if I don't like something, I'm going to say it. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. And when a guy gets hired, what they always, oh, yeah, no, that's your job. We understand you. We got it. But then, like, when you actually criticize, like, you don't understand. You don't know anything. You don't. And not to say that Brian Callahan's done that, because I don't know. I don't know if he's done it or if he hasn't done it. I don't know. But I told him, I'm like, hey, like, if I don't like something, I'm going to say it. And when it comes to the difference between Callahan and Vrabel, again, with Vrabel could never just get up there and own something that he screwed up. Well, it's like Fitz came on the show after the whole New England comments thing blew up. And Fitz was like, what did Vrabel think was going to happen when he went there and was talking about, it's so great here? He's like, what did he think people were going to say? So that's a different kind of frustration. With Callahan, I think it's kind of more of a rookie mistake. I think it's more of a, you know, hey, we can figure it out. And then you realize, oh no, we can't figure it. Again, I know football's changed, and I know it's a different game today, and it's a different era of how business is done than the way Floyd used to do business back in the day. But right tackle is right tackle. And if you don't have a right tackle, you're not going to win. And I think there might have been a chance where Brian Callahan's like, yes, but. And I think now Brian Callahan might be realizing, no, there is no but. If you don't have a right tackle, you don't have a right guard, you can't win. One texter says, boy, this one texter is worked up. One texter says, the more I watch them this preseason, the more I'm convinced this is who they are, a grinded out slugfest type of team who won't average 20 points a game. How much of that is accurate and how much of that is fallacy? Says the texter. Show me something to believe in and get excited for. Tired of the potential and getting told these guys are good. Give me guys to show me that are good, says the texter. Here's what I would say to that. I was at a wedding last night. And while the wedding was in Toronto, a lot of the people that were there were from Nashville because the couple was from Nashville. And these guys kept saying, Jared, are we going to be good this year? Like, what do you think? And I kept telling them, like, my expectations are 5 wins. But Jared, we're so much better this year than we were last year. Right, but you still don't have a right tackle. Don't have Derrick Henry. Don't have the Nico Autry's 11 and a half sacks. I mean, again, the guys you're relying on right now at key spots, like the guys that you're relying on are Radens and PT. And if Arden Key didn't get his suspension brought back, you would have been relying on Weaver. I mean, how many preseason games has Rashad Weaver played in? And how many times has he actually made a play in a game? It's ridiculous. One texter says, Jared, we've heard enough about the right tackle story. We understand what we need. They don't. That's the whole point. Like I kept saying from day one, hey, you need a right tackle. You need a right tackle. You need a right tackle. Well, we think PT can do it. And now, how do they even know? He played 14 snaps in the first preseason game. He didn't play in the second game. How do they even know if he's any good? And you can't say, well, they got practice, because the coach just said in the cut we played, hey, sometimes you need to see how it looks in the live bullets, and so that's what's bothering. With Vrabel, I thought it was smartest guy in the room syndrome. With Callahan, I think it's some rookie mistakes. Like, I think that it's making some mistakes that he's going to wish he could redo in the end. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. We'll get to more of your phones on this. Plus, there was some news over the weekend. It was a very good news for the Titans. But there is a but that comes after it. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company. 615-737-1025. Stillman & Company here on our program. Let's talk Twice Daily. That's right. I absolutely love Twice Daily. In fact, I don't know if I should let this out there, but I'm going to be moving soon. And one of the things when I decided to move, one of the things I got really, really excited about was that there is literally a Twice Daily. There's a Twice Daily down the street from me now. There is a Twice Daily that is less than 1 minute away. That's how important Twice Daily is for me. I love it. I go to Twice Daily all the time, and you can too. You want to know why it's called Twice Daily? Because you can go in the morning for coffee, and you can grab a snack in the afternoon, or you can grab a pizza. They make them right there for dinner. These snacks are the real thing. Made to order. You can get a huge warm pretzel with dip, 3-piece chicken dinner snack, spicy boneless chicken wings, and more. You can order in store or on the Twice Daily app, and it's all fresh, tasty, and priced just right for your budget. In fact, I've been up here in Canada. They got this Tim Hortons, and I'm like, that place, to me, that's like the Canadian version of Twice Daily. It's great. Again, get the app. All fresh, tasty, and priced just right for your budget. That's Twice Daily.
As the news came out about Arden Key, what are your thoughts on that, his suspension being overturned?
Yeah, same as they were the last time we talked about it. It's a league matter, and until we get any kind of official word from the league, then I'll refrain from comment, just like I did last time. So that's about all I can answer on that one.
Throughout the whole time, like, have you held hope that it would get overturned, or did you look at it?
It was in the league's hands for the appeal process, and there's nothing I can do or say or we can do as an organization. It's in their hands officially. So you just wait, and yeah, you're hopeful, of course, but you wait and you see what happens.
Arden Key reportedly not suspended anymore, according to Jeffrey Simmons, after Arden Key had been reportedly suspended, according to Paul Kaharski. Now, we'll get to the Kaharski thing in a second, because I heard something on Robbie and Retro this morning that I was like, what? But let's talk about the news. Arden Key, not suspended. Yay! So, let me say this. It's a big deal that the Titans are going to have Arden Key for the first 6 games of the year, because they didn't have a second option. It ain't Shane Ray, it ain't Weaver, and it ain't Jalen Harrell. They did not have a second option. It's Arden Key. And no matter what they would have done, it would have been the equivalent of, again, playing Malik at quarterback at pass rusher. But there is a but with this. In fact, there's a lot of different layers with this. There is a but. And the but is, do you realize how sad it is that we're this excited about Arden Key? Like, Arden Key is a starter on this team, but he's really not a valuable player in the NFL. He had 6 sacks. He had 6 sacks last year. He doesn't make a lot of money because he's just not really all that desired. He was drafted by the Raiders. Then they didn't want him. He went to San Francisco, and he was there, and they didn't keep him. He went to Jacksonville, and he was there, and they didn't keep him. Arden Key is just a guy. And yet, the Titans are so bad at edge rusher that when we hear Arden Key is not suspended for the first 6 games of the year with Caleb Williams and Aaron Rodgers and a game against Anthony Richardson and the Colts in there, and Jordan Love and Tua, and everything, it's yay. And I think that's kind of sad. In fact, one texter texted into the text line. Skylar said, man, Arden Key sucks. And I'm like, sucks might be a little strong, but most teams would not see a 6-game suspension of Arden Key and think, oh, God, oh, my God, where did they go? Oh, no, what are they going to do? Oh, my goodness. And this team does, because they have nobody else there. They have nobody else. So it's good news, but it's kind of sad that we're excited and this excited about Arden Key's suspension getting overturned. The second thing, there's actually a couple more layers. The second thing is, I want to know how he won. I mean, the NFL, you almost never appeal a suspension with the NFL and win. Maybe I should be a little remorseful for the fact that I've made some mentions about Arden Key over the last month and him drinking a little juicy juice. Maybe that being what helped him or didn't help him. I don't know. But normally, the NFL makes it almost impossible for you to win an appeal. It almost has to be like, yeah, I tested positive for Stratazoloff, and what happened was that this was included in this brand of meat, and here's the meat that it was in, and this is why I tested positive, kind of thing. Normally, they just say, hey, tough luck, man. You're responsible for what's in your body. It was in your body. Deal with it. Move on. The end. So I don't know what it is Arden Key did, but you got to give Arden Key a little bit of credit, because somehow, some way, he won that suspension. And then the third part of this is, and I only heard this on Robbie and Retro this morning, but Corey went on the show. And when Corey was on the show, Corey, I didn't know this. People were mad at Paul Kaharski after the NFL overruled their suspension on appeal for Arden Key. And it wasn't that they were mad that Paul reported the news. It was basically like, Paul Kaharski's reporting fake news. What? That's not how that works. Paul reported Arden Key got a 6-game suspension for the league. He got a 6-game suspension from the league. Jeffrey Simmons even acknowledged that he had a 6-game suspension from the league that got overturned in his report. And on top of it, when Arden Key was asked, had his media session after the news came out and said, I'm not going to take questions on that, then that confirms that it happened. Because why else, if somebody were to say, Jared Stillman, you're having an affair on your wife with another wife, it's like, no, I'm not. I don't even have one wife to begin. What are we talking about? No. So if Arden Key, if there wasn't, the pending issue, Arden Key wouldn't have said, I'm not answering questions about it. He would have said, where'd you get that from? That's not true. So Paul reported the news. Paul was right. And the fact that there are people who are upset at Paul just shows how soft our society can be sometimes. Mean, bald, column, whatever you would call Paul, reporter guy, mean, bald reporter guy said our guy was facing a 6-game suspension when that, in fact, is what was happening. And so now that he got it, he won his appeal. Now let's make fun or get mad of the bald reporter guy. It's like, really? They can't throw Paul under the bus like that. I know this. I know Commodore George Gooderham wouldn't do that. And I can tell you right now. One texter says, Arden Key is a headache to deal with. There's a reason he's on his 4th team. He talks so much for an average player, and you cannot get him to shut up unless the team loses. I would not say that, in my experience, Arden Key is a problem child. But I'm not on the team, so I don't know. But I would just tell you, in my experience, I would say I don't think that Arden Key is a problem child. One texter says, maybe that banned substance will elevate his level of play this year, and the Titans get a superstar. Well, if Arden Key was able to win a suspension, chances are that he probably didn't take anything. Because it's hard enough. These guys swear up and down they didn't do anything. Who was it that said that they took a polygraph and they said they passed the polygraph and the league still said they didn't care? I can't remember who it was. But it's not the league has to prove that you had it in your system. The league has proven it. You took the test, you failed the test. They've done their part. You have to prove that you either didn't have it in your system, or you have to prove that there is a legitimate reason that is without any fault to you as to why this happened. That's the only way you avoid this. The only way. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I have said many times today that I was out of the country over the weekend attending what was, again, a great wedding. But I was keeping up on Twitter. And for the second week in a row, Twitter was on fire over the Titans' week 1 opponent, and specifically their quarterback. So for the second week in a row, I sat down and I watched Caleb Williams' performance. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company on a Titans Monday. It's 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
on 2nd and 10. This is a shot position here from the 48. He's looking downfield, nothing there. Spins away, throws on the move. It is caught! Roma Dunze connects with his fellow rookie.
Howie just bails out of the pocket here. And this is the toughest throw you can do. Throw it to your left,
Away from the arm side, right?
and he does it.
That is in the bucket, off platform, away from the arm side. That's the type of stuff at USC that was dropping jaws of scouts across the country.
And he does it effortlessly. He's done it so.
So there you go. That was Caleb Williams and the Caleb Williams experience on Saturday. And I was not keeping up with the Bears against the Bengals, but I was on Twitter. And I saw people saying, oh, the Bears finally found their guy. Caleb Williams, Super Bowl MVP, here he comes. 5,000-yard passer, here he comes. And then, from somebody whose opinion I care about, Chad Withrow tweeted out and said the Bears have found themselves I think it was something like a purse-toting Patrick Mahomes. And I thought, oh, dear God, maybe Williams is that dude. Let's put it on. Let's see what he looked like. I got to see this. Now, the same thing happened last week. And last week when I put it on against the Bills, I'm like, he runs around with the ball. He made a couple of throws, but okay. So I put it on this week. I said, hey, if Chad's in on it, then it must have been something good. So I watched. And I saw the Bears do nothing. And then I watched another drive. And again, that next drive, the Bears, they didn't, I don't think they did anything. In fact, the Bears' first drive, they had the ball at the Chicago 16. And they ran, what is it? Let's see. They ran 3 plays. The second drive, they ran 3 plays. The third drive, they ran 3 plays. The fourth drive, they threw an interception. You know, it's like, wait a minute. What am I looking at here? Everyone's telling me that this is great. What are we talking about? And then Williams did end up scoring a touchdown. You know, he ended up running it in there. He had the great throw to Odunze on the sideline. And it was a great throw.
Brought to you by Hill.
I mean, I'm going to give him credit. It was a great throw, the one to Odunze. It was a run around a little bit again, and he put it right into Odunze's hands. But that's it. So one really nice, highlight play, and then he ran in the end zone for a touchdown against a bunch of Bengal second and third teamers at the end of the first half of a preseason game that no Bengal played in. And it's like, oh, Chicago got their guy. In fact, this is the exact thing that happened last year with me and Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett was going out there and throwing touchdowns to George Pickens against Trey Avery, the guys that should be bagging groceries. And all of a sudden I thought, hey, the Steelers, they look like a well-oiled machine. They're moving the ball. They're this, they're that. Then they go out there week 1 against real players from San Francisco, and Kenny Pickett looks like he can't play football. That's what happened. I mean, I've got it in front of me. Here's who the Bengals did not play in their preseason game. So this is who, again, after a 3 and out on the first drive, and I believe, was it 3 and outs or something like that? Caleb Williams completed 6 passes, by the way, for whatever that's worth. And there was no interception. It was Logan Woodside who was throwing the interceptions. But that should give you an idea. That's who played quarterback for the other team. Here's who didn't play for the Bengals. Chase, Higgins, Browning, Burrow, Charlie Jones, Trent Irvin, some guy named Pryor, Mike Hilton didn't play. Geno Stone didn't play. Von Bell didn't play. Cam Taylor-Britt didn't play. Zach Moss didn't play. Geronimo Pratt? Gerald Pratt, whatever. Pratt, the inside backer, he didn't play. Logan Wilson didn't play. The entire defense didn't play. Trey Hendrickson didn't play. Sam Hubbard didn't play. Sheldon Rankins didn't play. B.J. Hill didn't play. Their entire defense didn't play. So you're sitting here telling me that I need to lose my mind and lose my marbles over this Caleb Williams. That's what Twitter was saying. It's like the Bears have found their God. I watched Carson Wentz dominate the league for an entire season. It looked like he was going to be MVP. And guess what? He still sucked. And that was real football. This is a preseason game with nobody. I mean, goodness gracious. Can we slow down with Caleb Williams? Jared from Spring Hill says, Williams and Odunze have some decent tape already. Wish we would have picked Odunze over J.C. Latham. Well, you got to have a left tackle. And on top of it, they had one play. Traylon Burks has plays in his career that make you think he could be good. Now, look, I do think Odunze is going to be a good player. So I don't want anybody to think like, oh, Jared's sitting here saying Odunze is not any good. Or Jared's sitting here saying Caleb Williams is good. I'm not saying that. Caleb Williams, if I was picking first, I would have picked Caleb Williams in spite of all the things that I don't like. But the idea of just this, oh my God, did you see what Caleb Williams did? Woof. I'm like, okay, let me watch it. I watch it. Okay. Ben says, I'm going to laugh when Caleb Williams torches the Titans in week 1. Maybe. Like, I'm not getting up here saying this wasn't Derek Carr, right? Where we knew what Derek Carr was going into week 1 last year. We knew that Derek Carr kind of sucked. This is a guy who has the talent to be a generational type quarterback. It's possible. But again, also having a good first game doesn't make you a Hall of Famer. There are 3 guys that have thrown 4 touchdown passes in their first start. Connor, do you have any idea who the 3 guys are?
Will Levis is 1.
Okay.
Patrick Mahomes?
No.
Joe Burrow?
No.
Are they still in the league?
One definitely isn't. The other is.
Joe Montana.
Okay. The answer is Fran Tarkenton and Mariota.
I wouldn't have gotten that.
And so, again, like, Mariota had the best debut you could ever have. We know how that ended up. And all I care about right now is week 1. I mean, Caleb could go win the MVP. But one texter said, good morning football had a comparison of Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels this morning. And Jaden Daniels' numbers look just as good, if not better. Again, I don't want to just go off the numbers because that can be very misleading. But so I don't want to just sit there and say like, hey, he was 6-13. See, he's not good. I don't want to do that. But I do think there's something to be said for the fact that, like, 1, it's the preseason. 2, Cincinnati's not playing anybody. And 3, what he did, like, it wasn't that good anyways. And we've never questioned whether or not Caleb Williams has talent. Caleb Williams has always had talent. The question is, why didn't he win more games at USC? Like, he won the Heisman. He came back as the best quarterback, and he's got all the endorsements and everything else. And he's for sure going to be the number 1 pick. And he's, and they don't win. And it's like, okay, so why? It's never been a Caleb Williams. I've said, I don't like Caleb Williams' demeanor. I don't like the painted fingernails. I don't like the crying publicly with mom after a loss. I thought that was kind of weak. Again, you're the quarterback, but I really don't like the fact that he wouldn't answer questions after they lost a game. I mean, just you're the quarterback. Got to be accountable. And then I don't like the purse. And so I would have rather been in Washington's shoes where I could have picked some, Jaden Daniels or somebody else. But if I was picking first, I would have picked Caleb Williams. But it wasn't, again, like I walked away from watching his performance and thought, oh God, what are they going to do? 615-737-1025. Okay. There's something that I have been wrestling with for really the last 2 days. Do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up? It's going to make some people mad. And I know people get mad when I say certain things. So do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up? What do I do? What do I not do? I thought about it. I decided about it, and so on and so forth. So coming up next, we are going to talk about this. And regardless of whether or not the Titans, whether or not I'm being too hard on them for this, they're doing it to themselves. Don't blame me. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game. Company 1025 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning in Nashville studios here on a Reaction Monday, a Titans Monday after the win on Saturday against Seattle. And let's not waste everybody's time. There was almost nothing worth reacting to Saturday night. And maybe I'm a little resentful of that. I understand why the coach did what he did. It's not what I would have done, but I get it. Fine, whatever. He's not going to play the guys because they practice hard and it was hot outside. So We can only practice and play in in optimal conditions, so whatever. But there was really nothing that happened on Saturday night that is worth talking about. You're saying you're talking about some rookie kicker you didn't even know existed, hit a 59-yarder. That's the best thing you can talk about. Tells you about how unimportant the game was on Saturday. But there was something on Saturday during the game that I thought, what? Wait a minute. What? And it was Chad Brinker's booth interview. Did you see it? I think we need to talk about this. And this is going to make a lot of people upset. But I think the reason why it makes people upset is because I'm the only person that says this kind of stuff, because I'm the only person who doesn't just take, what the Titans say as gospel. In fact, I was the only one that thought Mike Vrabel might get fired, even because Diana said, right, I know. Okay. But when the Titans restructured their organization for the third time in 2 years, and they said, we've got this new management structure. Brian Callahan is the coach, and he will coach. Okay. Rand Carthon is the general manager, and we're going to promote him to executive vice president. He'll have final say on the roster, they said. Okay. At least there's clarity there, and he'll be GM, coach. Okay, fine, whatever. And Chad Brinker, who was the assistant general manager, is now going to get promoted to president of football operations. Wait a minute. So who's more important, the president or the vice president? And when it happened, there was somewhat of an explanation to me that it was, hey, Chad Brinker is in charge of the football stuff that doesn't really involve the players or the roster or any of that. So the PR department, Chad Brinker's in charge of. The IT department, Chad Brinker's in charge of. The equipment staff, the field turf, the toilets flushing properly. He's in charge of that. Who's going to play right guard? Rand. Well, who's going to be competing for right guard? Rand. Who's going to play right guard? The coach. But that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm like, I've never heard of an organization where the vice president outranks the president. And then Chad Brinker was the one who went to the Senior Bowl to scout. And he's in charge of analytics, and he watches tape, and he does all these. So that's not being in charge of IT. That's being in charge of the team. And what's happened with the Titans over the last however many months is they've done things that have made it seem like he's the most important guy there. When they had the draft press conference, Chad got up there and he introduced Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon. I said, wait a minute, who's in charge here? And somebody said to me, well, Chad's the president and Rand reports to Chad. I'm like, wait a minute, Rand reports to Chad? Because I was told that Rand picked the team and that Chad was just in charge of IT and communications and everything else. So now he's watching tape. He's going to the Senior Bowl, but he's also Rand's boss? Does that make any sense? And then I was told, well, some teams in other sports have a president and a vice president, or have a president and a general manager. But you can't play that game with me because I know what you're referring to. The Orlando Magic, my friend is like the third or fourth in command in Orlando. She's like the director of pro personnel or something like that for the Orlando Magic. They have a president and they have a GM. And the president is the one who runs the basketball team. He's the one who decides who we're picking at 13. He's the one who decides who Orlando's going to give a max contract to. That's his job. The GM reports to him and works under him. So again, Brinker goes into the booth and immediately is asked, so, congratulations on your promotion. What do you do?
Chad Brinker is the president of football operations here in Tennessee. First of all, thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I know last year you came in as the assistant general manager. As we take a peek now at the Seattle offense, they run right away up the middle. Nice job there by the interior on that Titans defense. But from assistant general manager to president of football operations seems to me like a pretty nice jump here from year 1 to year 2. What does your new job entail?
Yeah, it is. It's a great opportunity for me. I look at my role as just I'm here to help bring our entire football staff together and make sure they have everything they need to succeed in their respected roles. And so I'm involved in a lot of things. My background is as an evaluator, a scout, worked on the salary cap. So I still help Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan in those areas. But my day-to-day responsibilities deals with cap management, data analytics, involved in football information systems, communications, just everything you could think of when it comes to the football operations.
So what does he do? Connor, did you get a sense of that, like what he actually does?
No, it was like a word salad almost, felt like.
Okay. So again, it's like, hey, my job is to make sure that everybody that's working for us has what they need to be successful. That's the general manager. In fact, that's general managing. I manage everything to make sure that it works. That's general managing. And then there was this sentiment that he's a president, like the traditional president of an organization, like Sean Henry of the Predators. Sean Henry is Barry Trotz's boss, but we know that Barry Trotz is the one who is deciding who they pick with the 17th pick. We know that Barry Trotz is the one who's going to the World Juniors to scout these 16-year-olds out, and it wouldn't surprise me if Sean Henry didn't even know who these guys were. They took a Russian kid in the first round. It wouldn't surprise me if until 2 days before they decided to pick him, that he didn't even know who that was because that's not his job. But that's not what Brinker does. Brinker's football. In fact, again, hey, my job is to be the president here, the CEO type. It's supposed to be. If you're Steve Underwood, ask yourself this. Do you think Steve Underwood watches tape? Because Chad Brinker says that's still a big part of his day. Play the cut.
So Chad, with all that being said, though, you started with what your background is, football evaluations. I have a feeling that there's still some tape that comes across your desk, and you're taking a look and evaluating as well, having conversations with your GM, Rand Carthon, with your head coach, Brian Callahan, and, of course, everyone in the scouting system.
Yeah, I sure do. I'm heavily involved in all the evaluation, whether it's the preseason scouting to the in-season scouting, as well as the draft. The lifeblood of any organization runs through the draft. So I play a part in that as well. And, I'm here to support Rand. I'm here to support the staff. I have a long history, about a decade and a half of evaluation. So I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. So I got to find time throughout my day to make sure I block off 3-4 hours to make sure I get through the tape.
Okay, so I got to block off 3 or 4 hours every day to watch tape. Steve Underwood was not blocking off 3 or 4 hours a day to watch tape. In fact, Steve Underwood, when he was the CEO, probably didn't watch any tape. Burke Nihill, who is the CEO of the Titans, and here's another thing that's all fakakta about the president position, is they already have a president. And he's not watching 4 hours of tape because that's not his job. So, what does he do? So what's his job and what's Rand's job and who reports to who? If Rand reports to him, then he's in charge of Rand. He's Rand's boss. But then I'm told Rand's the one who's in charge. But he can't be if he has to report to somebody else. And then every time I bring this up, they point the finger at me like I'm some kind of troublemaker. Like, oh, here comes Jared Stillman again. It's because you don't like Rand. No, it's not that. It's because none of this makes any sense. In fact, he said on the broadcast that when he sat down with Amy for the job, again, he reports to Amy, which would make you think that he's in charge of football. He reports to Amy. He said she wanted clarity in the organization. Play the cut.
There's 3 things that I gained from that conversation with her, and that was she wanted clarity in her structure of the organization. She wanted consistency in performance, and she wanted stability in the organization. The successful organizations in the National Football League over the last 20 or 30 years has stability at the top. Well, that comes with winning. but consistency in the performance, not only on the field, but off the field, philosophically, our processes and our systems. We want to be a draft and develop franchise. That's how we like to approach that. But she also, was kind enough to allow us to go out and spend some money in free agency. I think we have about $282 million committed in cash this year. So she's really supported that. And then ultimately the structure that she created here to allow Rand Carthon to do what he really does well. And that's evaluate, build a team, build a roster, work with the coaching staff and the players. And Brian Callahan can focus on the product on the field and just focus on his coaches and allow him to do what he does best. And then I can come in and support.
Okay. What? So, Amy wanted clarity in all of this. And so that's why I'm here to be president, but I'm not in charge, but I'm in charge. That's clear to you guys? Amy wants consistency and structure. Right. But I don't understand the structure here. The GM reports to you, but the GM's in charge. And we just wanted the GM to be in a position to where he could do what he does best, which is evaluate and put together a team. And we just want to put the coach in position where the coach can focus on coaching. I'm sorry, was Mike Vrabel working the concession stands during the games too? Because what is this? So he can focus on coaching? What the hell else is he supposed to do? He's a coach. Again, I don't understand any of this. So we operate on this program by the duck theory. If it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, chances are it's a duck. And I'm going to tell you what I think this is. And I think it is, I feel comfortable in saying this because the Titans' ambiguity and conflicting narratives as to what Chad Brinker's actual position is leads me to believe that the truth is not convenient for them to share. And it's that I think they hired Rand Carthon a babysitter. That's what I think it is. I think that Chad Brinker is the Rand Carthon babysitter. Rand reports to Chad, and until somebody tells me something better, something more defined, that's what I'm going to think. Instead, I hear things like, well, Chad's just in charge of IT and communications and field turf. And then all of a sudden it's, hold on, I got to block out 4 hours of my day to watch tape. To watch tape on what? How the field turf is growing? Like, if you're in charge of field turf, you don't need to be watching 4 hours of tape. So that doesn't make any sense. And then I hear, well, other teams in hockey and basketball and other sports, they have positions like this. Right. The GM reports to the president. Theo Epstein was the president of baseball operations with the Chicago Cubs. Jed Hoyer was the GM. And Theo Epstein was in charge, and there was no question about that. So this is not that, because none of those teams have the GM in charge with a president above them. And then finally, all these big words about Amy structure and support. And I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know how you can support the general manager to put a team together to go out there and win while you're doing the evaluating and you're his boss. And yet he's the one who picks the play. Somebody help me make sense of this. And this is why I knew that me talking about this was going to make people mad. But here's what I really believe. They do this to themselves. If they wanted to demote Rand Carthon, they should have just done it. But they probably didn't want to because they knew it would look bad. They probably thought 1 year GM, if we demote him or we fire him after a year, we're going to look like the bad guy. So we're not going to do that. So they hired him a babysitter who happened to be a subordinate last year. In fact, the NFL requires the number 1 and number 2 of the personnel department to talk at the beginning of training camp. It's the only time Ryan Cowden would ever get in front of a microphone. But this year it was Rand and Anthony Robinson. Where was Chad? And you can't tell me that Chad's not high up in the personnel department. He's watching 4 hours of tape a day. So they do this to themselves. This isn't a discussion if they don't run Brinker out there to go do the interview on the game Saturday and to sit there and basically say, congratulations on your new gig. Wow, this is a great gig. What do you do? Well, I oversee the football department, and I manage the cap, and I run data and analytics, and I manage the GM and the coach. But you're not in charge? No. They did that to themselves. They expose themselves when they do that. So I've heard 19 explanations from the Titans about what this possibly could be. They are always all conflicting every time. So I'm going to tell you that if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. They didn't want to fire Rand after last year because of how it would have looked. So they hired him a babysitter. And then if things don't go well, they're going to blame Rand. That's what this is. And until somebody genuinely explains to me, and they don't say things like, they do this in baseball. Right. And the Boston Red Sox president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, in 2018, has Mike Hazen, the general manager, reporting to him. Until they do something like that, I'm not going to believe it because it doesn't make any sense. But don't get mad at me, because they're the ones that trotted him out there in the booth on Saturday for them to be like, so what do you do? Only for him to say a bunch of words that don't tell us what he actually does. Do you run the football team or do you not run the football team? Do you run IT? Do you run the communications department? Do you run the turf management, the equipment? Or do you decide who's playing right guard? And if you don't decide who's playing right guard, why are you watching 4 hours of tape? Somebody help me out. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. A lot of you want to weigh in on this. 615-737-1025. Joe Rexroad is going to tear this to shreds tomorrow. I already know what he's going to say, and it couldn't be more wrong. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
Yeah, I look at my position as a position of ultimate service. I'm here to service our head coach, our general manager, and every single department head. You know, we're about creating leaders within our organization, empowering people to do their jobs. And my job is to help lift them up, give them the tools that they need to succeed in their roles. And I really look at it that way. That's what true leadership is service to others.
That was Chad Brinker in the booth trying to explain. Again, this happened like 9 months ago that they made this restructure of management. And he's up there in the booth at the preseason game trying to explain what it is the hell he does. So, Connor, based off of that cut right there, what do you think Chad Brinker does?
I have no clue. I spent the whole break trying to figure it out. I don't know.
I mean, I tell you right now, these are his words, not mine. Services others, according to him, because that's what true leadership is like. So are you the leader, or is Rand Carthon the leader? And I've already told you what I think. I think Chad Brinker is Rand Carthon's babysitter, and the Titans did that because the Titans didn't want to fire Rand Carthon because they thought it would look bad after 1 year. That's just my gut. And until I hear something that makes a modicum of sense, outside of everybody's just happy, I'll tell you right now, I can't imagine that in a normal working environment, the general manager, when you get the general manager job, you have a press conference and people are excited for you and they say congratulations and they're happy for you because people believe, hey, you've reached the top of the job. You're in charge now. Your name's on those players. You're the one who's deciding, are we drafting the fullback or are we drafting the linebacker? You're the one that's why people say thank you and they get all excited and everything else. Not because, well, we think you're a part of the group and you do a decent job there. So I'm going to go ahead and get out in front of something. I already know what the Robbie and Retro program is going to talk about tomorrow when it comes to this. They're going to say, of course, Jared made a big deal about this. And Joe was going to go to the well and do something that he's already done before, which is he thinks Chad Brinker is like Steve Underwood. Now, if you're new, Steve Underwood from about 1972 to 2012, and then between 2015 and 2020, Steve Underwood was the president and CEO of the Titans. He was the liaison to Bud Adams, but he certainly wasn't the general manager, and he certainly wasn't the coach. You know, whatever situation it was, Underwood was technically the guy in charge, and it did involve the management of the coach and the GM. You know, should we fire the GM or not? But it certainly wasn't about the players or anything like that. Brinker's telling you he's not Steve Underwood. Brinker says he watches 4 hours of tape a day. Underwood didn't watch tape. Underwood didn't even know how to watch tape. Underwood would be the first person to tell you that he didn't know how to watch tape. Underwood was a lawyer who ran the business. They already have that. His name is Burke Nihill. He's the CEO of the organization. Again, look at a normal operation. The Predators, they have a president who you will see the president, you know, when there's a press conference, if they're hiring a general manager, he's there. But then everything that falls under the general manager's in charge of. You will not see him scouting. But if the president of the United States is going to be at Bridgestone Arena, he's there. The GM doesn't have to be there because it doesn't have anything to do with hockey, but he's the CEO of the operation. He's not watching 4 hours of tape. Now, I thought it was incredibly irresponsible, some of the narratives that got reported about Rand. And I think in large part, they came from some anti-Rand circles, some very pro-Mike Vrabel circles. I thought it was incredibly irresponsible what got reported based off of the information that was had at the time. But I think that all this stuff is just, it's like they don't want to say it. They don't want to say, yeah, we didn't think we could fire Rand after 1 year because it looked bad. Plus, Rand's a nice guy and he's trying his hardest, so we'll just put a little structure in there for him. We'll put a little support there for him. Oh, are you giving him an assistant general manager to help him with the things? No. We're giving him somebody above him. But this is not a CEO type deal. They have a CEO. He's not the CEO of the team. I'd be shocked if Chad Brinker knew how much the PSLs in the new stadium were going to cost. But that is something that a CEO knows. Now, here's the one thing I will say before we get to your phones on this. As far as the drama is concerned, well, who's it? Rand and Chad and Callahan and this one and that one. I'm going to say the same thing I said last year when we were all trying to figure out who was actually in charge of the team. And I said, I don't think anybody is. I think that Amy told them, hey, you two play nice now, and walked away. And I said, and if they win, this will work. Because then it'll be, well, Rand did a great job finding the players. No, coach, you did a great job coaching the players. But if they don't win, it's going to be a problem. Because these two dudes are not fighting for each other. These two dudes are hired to do jobs, and they may think the other one's hurting them from being able to do it. So if they win, this will all be, I'll tell you, promoting Chad was great, and Rand's picked the best players, and Callahan's coached them. But if they lose, it's going to be, well, but Rand didn't really know. You know what I'm talking about. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Everybody gets the credit when you win. But nobody, then it's going to be who's going to sit there and point fingers if they lose. One texter says, I wonder, in our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, I wonder if Rand's only responsibility is to do contracts for players. But let me say this. Chad Brinker says cap management's his job. Which, by the way, if that's the case, then what the hell does Vin Marino do? The cap guy. I mean, Connor, did he not say cap management was his job?
That was like the first thing he said.
So then Rand's responsibility to do the contracts for the players, that can't be his responsibility because Brinker's doing the cap. 615-737-1025. A lot of phones. We'll get to them. 615-737-1025. Plus, Chad Brinker said something in his interview that I just LOL'd at. Sometimes I wonder if people do not really know the organization they're working for. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
as you're watching this as an organization, do you also have a vision now as you're watching this? Do you see this happening in the new stadium?
Holding.
Oh, it's going to be
Defense.
that's going to be
29.
exciting.
The 5-yard penalty. Automatic. First down.
There's a lot of excitement right now in Nashville. It's one of the hottest cities in the country. A lot of people are moving here. You know, the Titans are on the rise. We're excited about what we got going on here, and with the new stadium on the horizon. I mean, this is going to be a fun place. It's a destination spot as is, and if we can get this football team moving in the right direction, put a couple drafts behind us and a couple free agency periods, and continue to build this team to have momentum as we go into the
That was Chad Brinker on the broadcast. I laughed out loud. And in fairness to Brinker, I laughed out loud at the whole idea of, Chad, how excited are you for the new stadium? He's like, well, if we get this thing turned around and we start adding some good draft classes and we start doing this and then we got to, because I mean, he's put this, they asked him about it on the broadcast, probably because they had run out of things to talk about with him about. But I mean, he probably knows, like, if you guys don't start winning and winning soon, you're probably not going to be here when that new stadium opens. Because there are 3 full football seasons before the new stadium. And if you don't win games, you will not be a part of the new stadium. You, Rand Carthon, Brian Callahan, Will Levis, all of you guys. Nobody with the Tennessee Titans in a leadership position should get comfortable or should start thinking about the new stadium unless you're selling something for the new stadium, because as the owner has showed you time and time again, I know she wanted clarity and consistency and structure, but she's only shown you 500 times that as soon as she doesn't think it's going the right way, she's pulling the plug. I mean, she gave contract extensions to John Robinson and Mike Vrabel in 2022. It's 2024. There's still more time between the John Robinson and Mike Vrabel contract extensions and now than there is between now and the new stadium. Think about that. So I do think it's funny when it's like, man, I'll tell you, this could be exciting with this new stadium. And we got the way. You need to worry about beating Chicago, because she might fire you after that if you don't win. That's the way things have been around here. I said that was kind of funny. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Gunner, text into the text line. Our phone line is by WilsonCountyHonda.com. Every general manager answers to someone, I'm sure, and it's not straight to the owner. I would think there's a person over the GM when it comes to some of the cap and finance, like, hey, we can probably make this happen, but I don't know, running the budget. So first off, let me tell you this. In every organization, the GM answers to the owner, regardless of whether or not there's a president in between them. And I'm talking about a CEO president, what Burke Nihill is. And again, I think the story is when John Robinson got fired, I believe this has been reported, when John Robinson got fired, it was Burke Nihill who walked in with the phone and handed it to him, and it was Amy on the phone that John Robinson talked to. So that's Burke's job. Just like that, Sean Henry's job with the Predators as the president. Ian Ayer's job at Nashville SC. Mike Jacobs was the GM. He picks the players and he picks the coach, but Ian Ayer is underneath the owner. But in all these cases, these guys answer to the owner, like the coach answers to the other. The owner decides on the coach. The owner decides on the GM. The owner decides on all this stuff. But to answer your question, there already is a guy who is in that position where it's like, well, I don't think that the GM just answers right to the owner. Yes. And his name is Burke. It's not Chad. And that's what makes this whole thing so ambiguous and so convoluted and so fakakta that it's just, again, it's something that we're always going over time and time again. And then I'm the bad guy because I'm the one that said, this doesn't seem right. Andrew says, Jared, I really didn't think there was anything there of what you said until the second time you played the Brinker clip just now, saying that he's there to be of service is the most wild and generic thing I have ever heard. What does that even mean? I'm not sure I buy into him being a babysitter for Ram, but at the same time, I really don't have a better explanation at the moment. There's not. Again, some of the explanations I've got are, well, Chad just handles IT and field turf and equipment and communications, and Rand handles the team. But then he says he's watching film for 4 hours and managing a cap. So obviously he's managing the team to some extent. And then I hear, well, baseball and basketball organizations, they do this. Right. And the president is the one in those instances who picks what the team does, not the GM. The GM works for the president, just like the Chicago Cubs. Theo Epstein was in charge. Jed Hoyer went up the food chain to him. And then when they had Brinker introduce Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon before the draft, I'm like, so is Brinker in charge? And somebody said, well, I mean, he's the president. And I said, well, okay, but I thought Rand was in charge. And I was told that Rand reports to Chad Brinker. So to answer, there's not an explanation. Let's go to Vincent, who's been waiting patiently and is up next on the program. Vincent, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's nothing unusual than what we've seen over the years. Yeah, he's going to fall on the sword for Rand, but it's nothing unusual for the Titans organization. Where they over there having potluck Fridays and playing the limbo in the office, cutting out at lunch half the week. Their organization is garbage and has been. Historic trash franchise. Sell the team.
Well, they're not going to sell the team. And this is not like anything that we've seen with them. I mean, at least the last two management structures made sense. John Robinson's the general manager, Mike Vrabel. John Robinson's the general manager. Mike Vrabel works for John Robinson. Now, I think Vrabel may have gotten out over his skis a little bit, and that might have been a problem, but that's a different discussion. I mean, the management structure was Robinson 1, Vrabel 2. Then last year, it was Carthon 1A or 1B, Vrabel 1A or 1B. They were working together. And I told you all at the time, I said, that's not going to work. I mean, it sounds nice, but it's not going to work. And then after a year, it was like, actually, it's not going to work. So let's go ahead and change it. And now it could be this guy. It could be that guy. I don't know. Again, I don't think that Chad Brinker's falling on the sword for Rand. I think if they win, everybody gets the credit. If they lose, Rand gets the blame. I mean, I had somebody in the local media, and this is what really bothers me, is that there are a lot of people in the local media that know exactly what I'm talking about, and they won't say it. Somebody texted me, because they know you say stuff like this, people get mad at you. I tweeted out on Saturday night when Brinker was in the booth, and I said, why is the GM not doing the interview in the booth? And somebody in the media sent me the tweet that I sent and said, he is. I.e., Chad Brinker runs the Titans. Had somebody else tell me, inside the football world, more in the scouting department or scouting side of things, more than anything else, they're like, Chad Brinker runs the Titans. But then I say something like that, you hate Rand. I mean, I said, let's see what Rand can do, not let's add more cooks to the kitchen. Skylar says, how true are the rumors of Will Levis being an owner influence pick? If that's the case at all, that's a problem. Let the football guys be the football guys. Well, I can't tell you what the answer to that is of how much Levis was or wasn't, an ownership-driven pick. I will tell you this. The owner is always involved in picking the quarterback. The owner is always involved in picking the coach. The owner is always involved. Again, I think in most well-run organizations, the owner, if you guys watch the Giants' Hard Knocks, Saquon Barkley, I think, is a good example of that, where John Mara kept walking into Joe Shane, the general manager's office, and was like, where are we on Saquon? And then was saying things like, if Saquon goes to the Eagles, I'll have trouble sleeping at night. And I'd really like to keep him. And he's basically telling the general manager, if you screw this up, I'm going to fire you. But the general manager has to run all those things by the owner. Just like they went over the first night of the draft, the two owners, the coach and the GM went inside the GM's office, and it was like, okay, if we get Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors, we're picking. If we don't, if they both go, then we're here with an offensive lineman. Then we're going to try to trade out of the pick, and we're going to try to take either Adunze or Bowers. So the owners are aware of what's going on. And if the owner gets up and says, no, I don't want this, then the GM's going to do what the owner says. That's why it's nice to be the owner. So I don't really have a problem. If Levis was an ownership-driven pick, I don't really have a problem with that, because my guess is the owner sits there and sees the draft board. And let's say Levis was ranked 16th on the draft board, and you don't have a long-term answer at quarterback. All these things are discussed ahead of time, right? Where they sat down and said, okay, if these guys go, then we're going to pick Skoronski. If this guy's gone, then we're going to pick this guy. So they knew what the operation thought of Levis before the draft. My guess is, if it's true that ownership influenced the Levis pick, they sat there, looked up at the board, and said, he's 16th. We know you like him, and he's available at 33. Let's get him. We know Tannehill's not a long-term answer. Let's do it. That's what I think happened on the Levis front. But the owner's always involved with the quarterback. It's just reality. Chip from Mount Juliet says the interview with Brinker was cringeworthy and dragged on far too long. A bunch of people are texting in and basically saying that their biggest issue with the Brinker interview is not that he didn't say anything, or not that it's totally convoluted about who runs the team, but they were pissed off that it took away from the game. And that I can understand. But in all seriousness, what was going on in the game anyways? Who cares? They didn't play any players. They even gave the guys that are going to play for this team that were like, I don't know if Dylan Radins is very good. They gave them the night off. One texter says the structure of what's going on is what Vrabel was the problem that Vrabel had with the Titans. Last year, Chad was unofficially in charge. He is and has always been Amy's go-to guy. That doesn't surprise me at all. I also don't know if you guys noticed, Brinker did not hesitate to talk about the great business school that he went to, and the AI and the analytics and the models and all, the stuff he always brings up every time. I think that's kind of like, I think it works. That's why he does it. They're like, wow, you're smart. You went to that smart business school. And I think it works. And that's why I think they do that. Again, this isn't like an anti-Rand thing. This is somebody tell me who's in charge. I tell you, man, the amount of people, even I kind of laugh at this. The idea of Connor, can we get the cut where he talks about, hold on, I want to say it was the cut that we returned on the last segment, not this segment, but the last segment. A lot of people are cracking me up in the text line about that. Did we have that cut, Connor?
Service?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Play it.
Yeah, I look at my position as a position of ultimate service. I'm here to service our head coach, our general manager, and every single department head. We're about creating leaders within our organization, empowering people to do their jobs. And my job is to help lift them up, give them the tools that they need to succeed in their roles. And I really look at it that way. That's what true leadership is service to others.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, I guess. Somebody said, who was it that said Rand reports to Brinker? Jared, let me just trust me on that one. Yes, trust me. Dylan in Antioch said, did anyone notice he was wearing one of the Breitling watches he loves so much? I did not notice that. I just saw him up in the booth, and I was like, what is going on? Like, what are we doing here? One texter says, this is a huge issue. Without proper chain of command, it's a circus. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, if Floyd was in Rand Carthon's position, he'd tell Amy, you have to fire him. Because I remember when John Curry got talked out of hiring Mike Leach, may he rest in peace, was talked out of hiring Mike Leach. And Floyd was like, if I was AD, and you told me I couldn't hire the coach, I'd say, well, then you need to fire me because that's why I'm here. And I can promise you this Bringer thing, that dude, no, no. 615-737-1025. So I have felt, I have a hot take about the game on Saturday, and I'm not upset about it. And I actually think it may matter for the 2024 Titans. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
You talked a little bit about the development of David Martin Robinson and the possibility of 4 tight ends, but how hard is 4 tight ends when 11 personnel is what you're running a lot of the time?
Yeah, I mean we'll run a lot of 11 personnel, but we have plenty in the 12 and 13 world that we've have part of our package, and so I would say that for us, just you'll get to talk to Rand, I think, at some point here after the cut down, but the philosophy from the end to the back of the roster that those last 6-7 spots is going to be less about checking the box that we have a 5th safety or a 4th tight end or whatever those numbers are going to be, and just finding the best players regardless of the position. And so we're trying to make sure that we don't lose a player that we think could be really good just because we need to check a box on a number. And we're trying to make sure that we do the right job evaluating those players. And so I don't think it'll be hard to keep 4 tight ends if that's what we decide to do, because I think if we do that, then that player will have earned that roster spot. He's worthy of the 53 spot.
Translation from Brian Callahan yesterday, David Martin Robinson's going to make the Titans. Like, just straight up, he's going to make the Titans. And he should make the Titans. And again, I'm not huge on this idea that UDFAs that come out of nowhere in training camp are going to be the next great superstar. Like, sometimes Joe Rexrode wants to believe Mekhi Sargent will be. I mean, I remember the summer of DeJuan Hicks in 2003. But I also remember Drew Bennett. And I remember watching the preseason and seeing Drew Bennett on the field and going, this guy's really good. And it didn't take long for Drew Bennett to be making real plays on Sunday. So I have a take that people are going to say is a hot take, but I think it's just because sometimes in the summer of the Titans, off season or whatever it may be, the summer of the it'll be fine season, whatever you want to call it. We've convinced ourselves that Chig and Wiley are legitimate starting tight end options. They are not. They are not. And because of that, I think David Martin Robinson is going to make the team. And Josh Wiley always gets hurt, got hurt in college, got hurt last year, has got a concussion right now. It's kind of like Burks. It's not his fault, but the number one ability in the NFL's availability. And with Chig, he had his chance. And it does feel like this coaching staff believes in Chig a lot less than the last coaching staff. Which makes me think that David Martin Robinson is going to find himself on the field. At first, it might be, well, Wiley's got a knee, and so he's out for a bit. And Chig, we want to run a 2 tight end set here. Nick Vanette's not really the athletic pass catcher that Martin Robinson is. It would not surprise me if David Martin Robinson ends up becoming the best tight end on this team. And I don't usually get in my feels about UDFAs. But that's how little I think of the tight ends they have on the team now. And the fact that Martin Robinson, I mean, he's a player. Like, he's actually good. And so I thought it was hilarious. Brian Callahan gets asked the question about David Martin Robinson and keeping 4 tight ends. And he kind of turns this into like, hey, man, the last part of the roster, we're not looking for, a 5th safety or a 4th tight end or a 6th running back we want the best players. That matters for a guy like Mason Kinsey, because Mason Kinsey might be one of the best 53. And so he's going to want to make the team based off of the merits of I belong. Martin Robinson's on the team, folks. Like, he's going to make the team. And again, maybe not right away will he get himself into the rotation. But I've been doing this long enough to know that when you've got unreliable ahead of you, this is a great opportunity for him. Nick Vanette's a blocking tight end. Josh Wiley, injury questions. Chig, at times Chig looks the part. At other times he does not. I think this is a good opportunity for him. So that's my take from the game. Of all the few guys that played that are going to matter for the Titans this year, he did play. And I think he's going to work his way in the rotation. He's actually going to matter this year. And I normally don't say that about UDFAs. I usually don't believe that about UDFAs. And I'll tell you right now, he's making the team. And I think Brian Callahan told you that. When it was like, hey, if we choose to go 4 tight ends, it'll be because he's earned it, i.e., he's on the team. That's it for us. Stillman and Company, the last week of the preseason. 102.5, 106 through the game.